Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Maria Marta Arias. Maria was born in 1984 in Laborde, a town in Santiago del Estero province, northwest Argentina. Her mother, Maria Olga Alonso, raised Maria alongside her two sons, Claudio and Juan. On her own, the brothers were very protective of their little sister, whom they affectionately called Marta from a young age. Maria was known for her incredible kindness towards others. She was a bright student who excelled in her studies, especially enjoying the challenge of learning new languages. To foster this passion, her mother enrolled her in an English course at a private institute, where Maria met a boy named Pablo. Pablo was born in 1983 into a middle-class family in La Banda, Santiago del Estero. Pablo grew up with his mother and his older sister. When Pablo was 14, he was accidentally involved in a dangerous incident that resulted in the death of a friend of the same age. The case was not legally prosecuted because Pablo was too young and had no criminal intent. However, the emotional impact of the incident stayed with him, especially after he moved to Cordoba to continue her studies. Feeling isolated, Pablo underwent significant changes. Those around him noticed he had become quick-tempered and prone to conflicts. Eventually, he developed an addiction to banned substance in an effort to turn his life around. Pablo enrolled in a rehabilitation program, although the journey was difficult and took over 3 years, but he succeeded in becoming a healthier person, motivated by his recovery. He began assisting his family with their business. During this time, he also trained in martial arts and performed well. Meanwhile, Maria grew into a quiet and modest young woman. She was externally attractive, with fair skin, long, straight hair, and large, light eyes. Family members described her as a sweet-natured, naive beauty who was easily misled. In 2004, Maria was diagnosed with lupus, a serious illness that affects the joints and muscles and causes inflammation of the organs. She needed immediate treatment and started a long-term care plan as soon as she left the hospital, carefully following all medical instructions to prevent flare-ups during this period. Pablo faced his own difficulties. He was deeply affected by the sudden death of his father, and shortly after, his mother suffered a severe injury in an accident that left her in chronic pain and unable to fully recover. One day, while playing, Pablo learned that a healer priest was visiting the local church. He took his mother there, hoping she would recover. At the church, they ran into Maria. They had not seen each other in years, enjoyed a friendly conversation, and agreed to meet again. Their communication resumed, and soon, Pablo told his mother that he had found a soulmate and planned to bring her home. At that time, Maria was a third-year student at the National University of Santiago del Estero, studying economic sciences. She is slim and very attractive. Pablo, who was nearly 2 meters tall and weighed 150 kilograms, felt he needed to lose weight to get Maria's attention. To do this, he started using a popular herbal dietary product. By 2005, he had lost 40 kilograms in just a few months. Crediting this rapid weight loss to the miraculous product, his life began to revolve around this substance, which he believed was almost magical. He also told Maria about a potential new drug being developed to treat lupus. In 2007, Pablo and Maria officially became a couple. When Maria's brothers first met Pablo at their home, Juan quietly asked their mother why he was there. It was evident that Pablo's presence was not well received by the family, but they chose not to confront the issue. Over time, Pablo gained more control over Maria's life, and she placed complete trust in him. This eventually led him to convince her to stop her prescribed lupus treatment and switch to his products, which he claimed were far more effective. During a sales conference, Pablo proudly showcased Maria as a testament to the effectiveness of the products, claiming her health had improved since she started taking them. However, this was not true. The product he promoted contained a large amount of sodium, which was contraindicated for someone with lupus. In mid-2007, in one of the churches in Santiago, they vowed to love and respect each other for life, exchanging rings and smiling. Their marriage was not officially registered, but they became a well-known couple in the dietary product industry, achieving significant income, which that raised concerns in the Arias family, of course. The Arias family was not envious of Maria's success. Instead, they were concerned because Maria was working non-stop, which was endangering her health. Additionally, after getting married, Maria distanced herself from her family, which was uncharacteristic of her. Maria's mother, Olga, sensed something was wrong and suspected that her daughter was avoiding visits to spare the family worry. Many acquaintances of Maria noted that the husband and wife seemed to compete openly in selling products. Initially, it appeared to be a playful rivalry, but it eventually turned into hostility. One day, an incident occurred, the details of which were never fully clarified. Several photographs emerged, showing Maria lying on a bed in a compromising state. Questions arose about whether these pictures were taken by her husband, herself, or perhaps someone else. At the end of October 2007, they were going to the neighboring province, Tucumán, to attend a congress on brand promotion. Luis Ramon Paz was among those who accompanied them on the trip. Maria and Pablo joked and were in a good mood. At the congress, Pablo gave a speech, but he felt not very comfortable because of the standing hot weather. The air temperature in that area rises very high, and there is humidity, which seriously affected Pablo's health. Tall and still suffering from excess weight, he read out his report in dark clothes. It was clear that he was not feeling well. He kept stumbling, and his friend Luis noticed this. After a while, in a conflict situation, shouting and waving his fists, Pablo tried to fight with another employee of the company, Bader. Suspecting him of intending to take away his clients, Bader did not enter the fight. Soon, Maria intervened and calmed her husband down. Pablo told Luis that he wanted to return to Santiago, but Luis refused. Pablo got behind the wheel, and he and Maria left the venue of the Congress. After some time, they were seen together in Independence Square. They walked past boutiques with pirated copies of famous films. Pablo walked ahead and was in a hurry, while Maria tried to catch up with him and pulled on Pablo's shirt. Pablo tried to walk as fast as he could to escape a scary voice in his head. Later, they continue home. For the next 2 hours, Pablo runs away from the threatening voice. He says the voice is chasing him. Maria accompanied her husband, unable to leave him alone in such a state, repeatedly switching from taxis to buses and back. Eventually, they returned to the cathedral in front of Independence Square, which was only 3 blocks from the starting point. In the cathedral, it was noisy. There were crying babies waiting for baptism at the evening mass. The clock showed 5 p.m., and Maria rushed inside. Perhaps Pablo wanted to calm the inner voice, or maybe he just wanted to imitate madness in front of witnesses. Pablo and Maria stood first in line. Not respecting those who came earlier, Pablo approached the priest and asked for his priest to be reinstated. The priest told him to step aside and wait, but Pablo refused to back down. Meanwhile, Pablo called a photographer who was working with another client nearby when the priest reached out and touched Pablo's face. Photographer captured the moment perfectly in a photo before leaving the cathedral. Pablo took a sip of holy water. The priest noticed Pablo's anxious movements and sweating, as well as Maria's evident distress when the photographer searched for they to give them the picture. He couldn't find them. Concerned by her husband's unusual behavior, Maria sought help from her friends, leaving Pablo alone. While at Independence Square, Pablo saw a policeman. Pablo asked to be arrested. The officer was taken aback and summoned a patrol. Pablo got into a police car, which drove him to the station. Once there, he calmly entered and requested some water. After drinking a glass, he lay down on the floor and started drinking directly from the tap. At that moment, Walter Cancino, a friend of his, walked into the police station. Ignoring Walter, Pablo began promoting a dietary product to the officers, who laughed and called him crazy, despite their mocking. He persisted in wanting to sell medicine and repeated his wish to be sent to prison instead of being incarcerated. He was taken to the hospital. In the hospital, Pablo caused a disturbance and accidentally knocked over a medical cart filled with surgical instruments. The examining doctor confirmed that his health was stable and reassured him that everything was okay. Advising him to get some rest, Pablo remained under police protection until his wife arrived. When they reunited 1 hour later, he was calm and mentioned that he would explain his earlier behavior soon. That same night, Walter was staying with his wife at the Catalina Park Hotel. The hotel's facade, beautifully illuminated, was quite striking. In the first-floor bar, there was a shiny piano, and the stage featured expensive artwork. Walter and his wife sat at a table discussing Pablo's unusual behavior. After midnight, Maria and her husband checked into the same hotel as Walter. Receiving room 514, they exchanged greetings with acquaintances in the bar and were seen ascending in the elevator together, holding hands. When they entered the room, Pablo removed his trousers and his sweat-soaked shirt. Maria also undressed, and they both lay down on the bed without saying a word. After a while, Maria turned her back to Pablo. At that moment, he climbed on top of her, pressed one knee against her chest, and grabbed her neck with both hands. Squeezing tightly, he didn't release her until she stopped showing any signs of life, using a scalpel that he had stolen. Pablo made cuts on Maria's eyelids and struck her several times with the scalpel. He then pulled her by the hair, dragging her out of the room and down to the first floor. Hotel staff intervened, and police officers soon arrived. There were screams, panic. This horrific crime shocked the entire province, and news of it spread throughout Argentina. Pablo was taken to a psychiatric hospital, where he was placed in a ward with barred windows. The next day, a local newspaper published a photograph of Pablo sleeping on a small bed that could barely support his 120-kilogram weight while he was tied up. The police faced a challenging case. First, they needed to determine whether Pablo was mentally competent when he committed his actions. Then, they had to find the appropriate legal classification for his behavior. At that time, judicial officials did not have the same legal guidelines that exist today. Prosecutor could not charge Pablo with murder with aggravating circumstances because he is not married. He was not officially in a relationship with Maria. They had only been engaged in a church ceremony. Additionally, the concept of domestic violence was not recognized back then. One of the local newspapers purchased the photo of Pablo and the priest from the photographer for a small sum, even though the photographer knew it was worth more, but accepted this offer. After the crime, while in the hospital, Pablo read the Bible, slept, and experienced periodic episodes of distress. Meanwhile, forensic doctors revealed the autopsy results of Maria's body, which showed horrific injuries. Following the autopsy report, the court added the charge of desecration of a corpse to the existing charges against Pablo. In April 2008, a specialized medical board conducted a mental assessment of Pablo to determine whether he was mentally competent to stand trial. After a thorough examination, the board concluded that Pablo was mentally fit to participate in the proceedings without any mental health adjustments. He was therefore charged with aggravated murder and ordered transferred from the hospital to a standard prison. He was taken to Villa Urca prison, one of the most notorious detention facilities in the area, where conditions were extremely harsh. There, Pablo was housed with 5 prisoners considered the most dangerous, those with serious criminal records during his early years in prison. Pablo maintained a relationship with a missionary who had visited him regularly since the murder. However, over time, this relationship gradually faded and eventually ended. A few days later, Pablo attended his first hearing, an event that quickly became a sensation. He was accompanied by at least 10 members of the prison service's special strike team. Their large presence caused a stir, with journalists scrambling to get close enough to interview him. Upon arriving at the investigation department, Pablo encountered prosecutor but before she could speak, he requested a cigarette, while the judge read the charges against him. He fidgeted with his clothing. Attempting to button up, he took a seat across from the case manager and listened quietly to the accusations. Pablo then announced that he would not give any testimony to the defense. Meanwhile, the prosecution's lawyer, Mario Leyva, presented the argument that Pablo could not have acted in a state of extreme psychological agitation, since a person who was insane could not have carried out such a brutal act as cutting out the victim's eyeballs with such precision and skill without damaging them. Leyva also alleged that Pablo was jealous of Maria, whom he considered a dangerous competitor. The unhealthy competition between the two came to a head that fateful day. Furthermore, Leyva hypothesized that the biggest sign that Pablo had planned his crime was the insane behavior he displayed in the hours before the incident. According to Leyva, that act of feigning insanity was simply a strategy to avoid responsibility and create a cover for himself. Leyva described the behavior as to evade responsibility for the planned crime he committed before the members of the medical commission, after conducting a comprehensive assessment of Pablo's mental state, came to the conclusion that he was fully competent and responsible before the law. Their view was consistent with the view that Pablo could participate in criminal proceedings without any mental health adjustments throughout the trials. Pablo remained surprisingly calm, even somewhat indifferent, as if the events surrounding him had no impact on him. He seemed unconcerned with the seriousness of the charges. This indifferent attitude has sparked much public controversy, causing many to feel uncomfortable and question his true attitude towards the consequences of his actions. The only person visibly distressed by his behavior was his mother, Graciela Beatriz Rodriguez, who pleaded with those present to treat her son with respect as he left the courtroom, despite his inappropriate gestures throughout the trial. On June 13, 2008, during the ongoing hearing, the defense stated that the defendant wished to testify this time. Pablo controlled himself and did not act dramatically when sharing his account of the events. Pablo expressed his love for his wife and his regret for his actions. However, he clarified that his regret was not due to being on trial or fearing punishment, but because he missed Maria when asked about his actions with a surgical scalpel. He chose to remain silent since the tragic death of her daughter. Olga has been unable to sleep in her grief. She has begun to believe that her son-in-law is the culprit. The act of blinding Maria has led her to believe that her daughter must have seen something terrible about Pablo, a dark secret that he wants to hide at all costs. She struggled to find out the reason for this crime. During investigation, the killer's scalpel was never found. Investigators dismissed the idea that Pablo had flushed it down the toilet or thrown it out of the window. They searched under the building's windows, but discovered nothing. The lawyer speculated that Pablo might have passed the scalpel to friends staying at the same hotel. However, the friends who were questioned claimed they only learned about the incident later and did not hear anything unusual at the time. Judge tried to reach Pablo's mind, but, which seemed impossible, Pablo's senseless position was preserved when the judge asked him about his relationship with Maria after the absurd chatter. Pablo returned to his seat and began to grimace. Interrupting the course of the hearing, he continued to adjust his clothes, unbuttoning them repeatedly, shifting in his chair and yawning. At 11 a.m., members of the court threw him out, but it did not help. One of the worst actions of Pablo during those days was when he asked the secretary if she wanted him to gouge out his and the lawyer's eyes. His only goal was to convince everyone of his madness. But his mental state was analyzed by 15 experts, and 13 of them stated that the man was perfectly aware of everything at the time. The most emotional moment of the murder trial was the speech of Juan and Claudio, Maria's brothers. They spoke about how many hours a day their sister worked, even to the detriment of her own health, to please her demanding husband, Pablo. They described him as an extremely jealous man who psychologically pressured his wife, according to Juan and Claudio. Their brother-in-law was obsessed with non-existent conspiracies against himself and unreasonably questioned Maria's fidelity. The men claimed that Pablo deliberately forbade his wife to communicate with her relatives and then completely senselessly and cruelly deprived her of life. As they walked out of the court, the two brothers could not hide their emotions, their faces heavy with sadness and their eyes red. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, they hugged each other tightly as tears welled up in their eyes. In that moment, their bond of family became a source of strength to help them continue their search for justice. In September 2009, the judges of the Second Department of the Criminal Court declared Pablo guilty of murder with particular cruelty, arguing that he simulated insanity in order to deceive the court administration and achieve impunity or a less severe punishment before sentencing. He was given the opportunity to confess, but Pablo was determined not to change his testimony, as in all previous. He was eventually given a life sentence in September 2011. The country's Supreme Court upheld this decision some time later. It became known from the news that Pablo had learned to play the violin while sitting behind bars and that he had been denied a request to study law. The authorities stated that he was not allowed to study because of the heinous crime for which he was convicted and due to serious problems in prison. It turned out that he portrayed himself as a victim of other prisoners and allegedly barely survived in this hell. However, over time, Pablo won the respect of his cellmates and took on a leading position. One of the facts that indicated prisoners considered him a respected person was that he filed complaints in the Argentine court regarding the inhuman treatment he faced, which also affected other prisoners. This leadership role forced representatives of the penal system to choose him several times to resolve conflicts with rebels in prison. Pablo did not participate in riots, and if problems arose, he sat out the time. According to some media outlets, Pablo spent time studying the works of Alex Day, a well-known motivator and author of self-help books. In 2017, Pablo met a woman hairdresser who was visiting another prisoner in the same prison. They began to communicate, and the new year became a double holiday for Pablo because in December, he married his beloved after a civil ceremony. A religious ceremony of initiation into marriage took place in the presence of relatives. Although they were separated by thick concrete prison walls, the wife repeatedly overcame great distances and came on a date to Pablo. Close men said that this unexpected love inspired him to write poems and songs while he had almost lost heart, not hoping to be released. Sometime later, after numerous court hearings and listening to reports from a psychologist and stories from people who had communicated with Pablo in prison, the Tucumán court allowed him temporary releases twice a month for 3 hours. The decision was made on June 29 of the year, however. When was asked about his opinion, a psychologist spoke out against it. In his opinion, psychological and psychiatric reports stated that Pablo should not be released into society under any circumstances, mainly because he was still a person unable to control his emotions. In contrast, another doctor, Lorado, spoke out in favor of providing the said concession. According to his assessments, Pablo has not posed any danger to others for many years. Lorado claimed that as a doctor, he can promptly identify the deterioration of a prisoner's mental health and intervene to eliminate the problem. In his opinion, Pablo will no longer attack other people. Pablo was finally allowed to leave prison, marking a major turning point in his life after years of incarceration. This decision was made on the condition that he be closely monitored by 3 members of the Tucumán Prison Administration to ensure his security. A tracking device was attached to his wrist, allowing authorities to track his movements at all times. The guards not only accompanied him on the way to his residence to meet his wife, but also ensured that he returned to detention on time. This change was a privilege for him. Pablo and his new wife have a daughter. The desire to be close to and care for her was one of the main reasons why Pablo was approved to leave prison. This is also part of a legal policy in Argentina that allows people serving sentences the opportunity to reintegrate into society in exceptional cases. Under current law, Pablo will have the opportunity to apply for parole after serving 35 years in prison, which would be in 2042. Until then, he will have to comply with strict rules and maintain good behavior to be considered for a reduced sentence in the years to come. During that long period of time, his rights, such as reduced sentences or access to reintegration programs, will depend on the authorities' assessment. There are still many challenges ahead. Leaving prison this time is an important start, allowing Pablo not only to reconnect with his family, but also to gradually demonstrate his change to society. The family of Maria Marta Arias have expressed anger and heartbreak at the court's decision to allow the man who killed their loved one to walk free. For them, this is not only an injustice, but also a mockery and insult to the pain they have endured. They feel as if the dangerous killer is being given the chance to live a normal life, despite the irreparable damage he has caused their family. Despite their anger and frustration, Maria's relatives have been forced to accept that they have no choice but to comply with the decision of the justice system. While they want to fight to the end, they realize that changing the verdict is impossible. They bitterly admit that the freedom of Pablo serves as a constant reminder of what they have lost forever. However, her family insists that this does not mean that they will give up on demanding justice and speaking out against injustice. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Mark Despain. On Wednesday afternoon, August 24, 2011, 33-year-old Michelle Despain left work to collect some urgent documents from home. She arrived back from the bank around 3 p.m. and noticed the back door was unlocked, which alarmed her. Upon entering, she found the house completely ransacked. Drawers were open, items were scattered everywhere, there was broken glass on the floor, some clothes were tossed in the bathtub, and a jewelry box was open in the bedroom. Then she made a horrifying discovery. Her husband Mark was lying unconscious on the kitchen floor. He had been shot and was bleeding. Frightened, Michelle screamed and ran outside. She called 911 and told them that robbers had broken into the house and shot her husband. The police then arrived at the scene of the crime. When the police and ambulance arrived, they found the house in complete chaos. At first, it appeared that a robbery had taken place. Doctors later confirmed that Mark had been dead in the kitchen. The medical examiner stated that Mark had been dead about an hour before the police arrived. He had 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest and one to the head. Burns to his skin indicated that he had been shot at close range. After a careful examination, the police suspected that the crime scene was staged. They discovered that on the day of the incident, Mark was at home, then had lunch with Michelle at a cafe. After lunch, they had ice cream and took some dessert home. Michelle then went back to work, while Mark returned home. The police questioned why the robbers executed Mark at close range, suspecting that this was a planned attack rather than a spontaneous act of violence during a robbery. The police started gathering detailed information about Mark Despain and his family. Mark began dating Michelle when she was 18 and he was 19, though they had known each other since school. Michelle had a young daughter from a previous relationship. Soon, they decided to live together, and Mark's parents bought them a trailer. Mark treated Michelle's daughter as his own and worked in the family business as an investor and real estate appraiser. As Mark's career advanced, he founded his own company and earned a substantial income. The couple moved from a trailer to a large, beautiful house with a swimming pool in a prestigious area of Jonesboro, Arkansas, USA. Michelle and Mark had 2 more children together, and their family of 5 appeared friendly, wealthy, and happy. They vacationed at expensive resorts several times a year, including trips to Mexico and Disneyland. Initially, Michelle was a housewife but later began helping Mark with his business and worked at a local bank. Despite Mark offering for her to stay home, she wanted to pursue her career. After Mark's suspicious death, Michelle became the prime suspect in the case. She was summoned to the police station for questioning. Michelle claimed that she had a solid alibi, as she was at work that day and only went home for work-related reasons, where she accidentally discovered her husband's body. Her alibi was confirmed by surveillance camera footage showing her returning to work after lunch at the time her husband was murdered. As a result, suspicions against Michelle were dismissed. The police interviewed neighbors, who mentioned seeing a suspicious black man driving an old blue Mercedes in the area on the day of the crime. Police considered whether Mark had any enemies or people who might have wanted to harm him. Some family acquaintances described Mark as a powerful and ambitious man who could have made enemies. A work check revealed that he was scheduled to work that day but suddenly decided to go hunting and stay home. Police spoke with Michelle again to clarify the timeline of events and possibly uncover new details they may have missed before. Michelle told police that she met Mark for lunch that day. They went to a coffee shop near the bank where she worked. After lunch, Michelle returned to work at 1:30 p.m. and returned home again after 2:30 p.m., where she found Mark murdered. This time, however, Michelle revealed new details. She said that when she saw Mark lying on the floor in a pool of blood, she approached him to check if he was still alive. Michelle shook Mark's leg and called his name, but he didn't respond, so she assumed he was dead. Michelle ran out of the house and called 911, then waited for the police to arrive. She called her mother, explained what had happened and asked her to come. When her mother arrived, Michelle was near her house, and the police and ambulance were already on the scene. The police asked Michelle if she knew anyone who might want to harm her husband. To everyone's surprise, she confidently named Mark's father, Jack. Michelle explained her reasons for suspecting him. Initially, when she and Mark got together, his parents seemed like good people. They even bought them a trailer to start their life and supported Mark in his work at his father's company for several years. However, after Mark became a successful employee, he wanted more responsibility and asked his father for a larger share of the company. His father refused, leading to a fallout between them. Mark then decided to leave and start his own company. Jack was upset about this, and since then, they hadn't communicated. Michelle realized that Jack was cruel and cold-hearted after getting to know her husband's parents better. Jack immediately disliked her daughter from a previous marriage, and a serious feud erupted between him and the 13-year-old. Jack also showed hostility towards Michelle herself, leading her to suspect he might harm Mark out of spite. Michelle's father shared her concerns, having encountered Mark's father while working for him and believing Jack capable of murder. He even heard Jack threaten his own son with violence, and they had a strained relationship due to a business dispute. The police took note of this information and began investigating the relationship between Mark and his father. They discovered that Mark and Jack had argued over money and the company years ago, leading to a strained relationship. However, it was unclear why the father suddenly decided to kill his son at this time. The police spoke to Mark's parents. The father confirmed the argument but mentioned that the money dispute started because of Michelle's influence. According to them, Michelle always wanted more and was never satisfied with their financial situation. Even though Mark made a lot of money, she insisted that he ask his father to transfer most of the company to him. During their arguments, it was clear that Michelle was to blame for everything. Jack said that they kept in touch with their son despite their arguments, but ignored Michelle. Shortly before the tragedy, Mark revealed his intention to divorce his wife. That day, Mark called Jack, asking him to stop by the house to buy hunting supplies. The father noted that only Michelle knew he would be home that day. Mark's mother mentioned that Michelle feared divorce because it would mean losing the finances and status she had enjoyed from Mark. Her parents advised the police to investigate Michelle's actions on the day of the murder further, suggesting that she may be more complex than she appears. The father suspected that she was involved in the case, perhaps not as a killer but as an organizer. Jack reported an incident that Michelle had mentioned to the police, involving a conflict with Michelle's daughter, Brooke. Jack discovered that Brooke was having a romantic relationship with her boyfriend and found several revealing photos on her phone. Jack warned her to end the relationship and stop taking such photos, and threatened to tell her parents. In retaliation, Brooke used Jack's phone to take topless selfies and sent them to her boyfriend, then told her mother that Jack had been harassing her and taking inappropriate photos. Michelle was furious when she found the photos on Jack's phone and accused him of taking them. Jack denied the accusations, and Michelle fought back, leading to a fight. After the incident, Jack's wife left him and filed for divorce, suspecting him of child molestation. Michelle reported Jack to the police, but the investigation revealed that Jack was not involved. It was confirmed that the photos were taken by Brooke herself. No charges were filed against him, and Jack's wife returned after the truth was revealed. However, the experience left a lasting negative impact on their relationship, damaging Jack's reputation and health. They decided to cut ties with Michelle and her daughter, allowing her to raise Brooke as she wished. Brooke later admitted that her mother had convinced her to take the photos to damage Jack's reputation and alienate Mark from his father, and their plan almost succeeded. Jack and his wife were not considered suspects because they had a solid alibi. They were on vacation in another city on the day of the murder. Based on a tip from Mark's father, the police turned their attention to Michelle. They wanted to understand why Michelle would kill her husband and what her motive might be. Michelle and Mark had shared 15 happy years together, raising 2 children and building a successful business. They lived a comfortable life without any financial worries. So why would Michelle kill her husband and risk losing the family's main source of income? Police quickly uncovered that Michelle was not the grieving widow she appeared to be. In reality, she was having an affair with a younger colleague, who was 24 years old, a few months before Mark's death. She fully supported him financially, covering his apartment, groceries, and all bills with the money her husband earned. The police also learned that Mark had significant debt totaling about $2 million, despite his substantial wealth. Michelle was found to be taking money from her husband's business account, and it was discovered that Mark had 2 life insurance policies totaling $1 million. This new evidence further raised suspicions about Michelle, leading police to call her in for questioning. Police questioned Michelle about an affair with another man. She admitted to having a new romantic interest in a young man but insisted her husband was unaware of the affair. Michelle explained that their marriage had been troubled for a long time and they were discussing divorce. She planned to move out soon but denied any involvement in her husband's murder. Michelle argued that she had no motive to kill him, as he was a loving father and will pay a large alimony. Despite their suspicions, the police lacked concrete evidence against Michelle. Surveillance camera footage from the bank where Michelle worked confirmed her presence at work during the murder. The investigation hit a dead end. The case took a dramatic turn when police received information from a person who reported that someone was bragging about killing Mark Despain. The person was identified as Terrence Barker. Police investigated and discovered that Terrence's phone had been near Mark's home at the time of the murder. They also learned that a friend of Terrence owned an old blue Mercedes. When Mark's neighbors, who had seen the African American in the Mercedes, were shown Terrence's photo, they identified him. Police located Terrence and brought him in for questioning. Although Terrence initially denied any involvement, Terrence eventually confessed to shooting Mark. He revealed that a client had promised to pay him $10,000 for the murder, which was why he accepted the job. However, he He refused to reveal the client's identity and claimed that he had not yet been paid for the murder. Terrence was arrested and charged with murder. Police found and questioned Johnny Hubbard, the driver of the blue Mercedes and Mark's friend. Police hoped Johnny would cooperate with the police and share information. Johnny was one of Mark's tenants and knew Michelle's father, Carl Kelly. Johnny agreed to assist the police and reveal everything. He explained that Carl had approached him about Mark's murder and would pay him money. Terrence knows about this plan and also wants to join to make money. They met Carl in a parking lot near the church to plan the crime. Their plan was for Terrence to shoot Mark. Even though Terrence did not know Mark, he agreed to join in for the money. As a result, Johnny was arrested and charged with murder. When Terrence found out about Johnny's testimony against him, he decided to reveal everything as well. He confirmed his friend's account and added that Carl gave him a gun near the church, which he used to shoot Mark. Carl showed them Mark's house and said they needed to wait for his command to carry out the murder. On the day of the crime, Terrence also revealed that not only was Carl involved, but his daughter Michelle was too. Michelle was the mastermind behind the operation, giving her father instructions over the phone. Her father helped her with everything and covered for her. Police reviewed the messages between Michelle and her father and discovered a text that exposed her involvement. At 8:20 a.m. on the day of the murder, she texted her father, "I can't live like this, it's been a terrible morning." Her father replied, "Okay, you can take him out to lunch." The police believed that Michelle had arranged to meet Mark for lunch that day, which gave her father the chance to take Terrence into the house, hide there, and wait for Mark to return home so he could shoot him. Carl's phone records showed that he was present at the crime scene during the murder and played a role in the planning. An analysis of Michelle's communications with her husband on the day of the murder showed that she invited Mark to lunch. He initially refused because he was planning to go hunting, but she insisted and asked her husband to meet, and he eventually agreed. Throughout their lunch, Michelle kept in touch with her father via text message, informing Carl when they had finished eating and when Mark was on his way home. Michelle and her father were arrested. Michelle initially denied any involvement, but eventually confessed and claimed that her father was solely responsible for the crime. She said that her father had planned the crime, motivated by insurance money and a desire to take over the family business. However, the police were skeptical of her claim because she had sent her father a text message that morning urging them to kill. Carl eventually admitted his role in the crime. Michelle and her father, Carl Kelly, were charged with first-degree murder of Mark. The 4 people arrested in the case later agreed to plead guilty to the prosecution, which reduced their sentences but also prevented them from appealing the court's decision in the future. Mark's parents accepted the deal because they wanted to avoid a lengthy trial. Terrence Barker and Carl Kelly received sentences of 35 years each, Johnny Hubbard was sentenced to 18 years, and Michelle Despain received 30 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shertha and Leon Britz. Our story takes place in a small town called PAF, South Africa, with a population of about 3,000 people. In 1979, Leon Britz was born there. He had a brother named Toki. Their father owned a local hotel and other businesses, providing a comfortable living for the family. Leon was a bright and hard-working student who excelled in school and was active in sports. As a teenager, he started working in the family's hotel, learning to manage the business and assisting his father. Once his brother was old enough, the Leon brothers worked together. The Leon were a close-knit family, respected throughout the area. When Toki turned 18, he left their small town, but Leon remained with his parents. Leon dreamed of taking over the family hotel business, which frequently hosted large events and parties. At one of these events, Leon noticed a stunning girl with chestnut hair and eyes. he couldn't stop looking at her and decided to introduce himself. However, the girl, Shurda, had just turned 14, although she appeared older, while Leon was already 25. Shurda was born on September 6, 1990, and was the youngest of 4 siblings. Suritha's family lived in poverty, and their situation became worse when her father died of a poisonous spider bite. Her mother was left to raise 3 children on her own. Shurda endured hardships with her family for many years. Suritha's family barely had enough money to buy food, making the future of the children very bleak. Then Leon, who came from a wealthy family, met Shurda and fell in love with her despite their large age gap. Shurda, a schoolgirl, was also drawn to Leon. They started talking, and Leon pursued her with extravagance, taking her to fancy places and giving her expensive gifts. This left a strong impression on Shurda, who was extremely grateful to Leon. She realized she could build a future with him without lacking anything. Their relationship blossomed as Shurda enjoyed Leon's attention, and Leon loved her very much. A few months later, Leon expressed his wish to marry Shurda, and his mother approved after meeting her. They then began dating officially, and their relationship seemed perfect. However, when Shurda turned 15, her classmates noticed changes in her behavior. She started wearing loose-fitting clothes, avoided showing her belly, and became very shy, as if she didn't want to be approached. Eventually, Shurda told Leon that she suspected she might be pregnant. Leon was very upset, as a pregnancy could result in accusations of statutory rape since he was already 26 years old. Leon, who controlled the relationship, had initiated their intimacy. To address Suritha's suspicions, he gave her money to visit the clinic, where the doctor confirmed she was pregnant with twins. When she told Leon the news, he became angry and insisted she not keep the pregnancy, giving her money for an abortion. Despite her hesitation, the pressure from Leon and their age difference compelled her to comply. She went to the clinic alone and followed Leon's demands. Leon wasn't opposed to having a family and children, but he believed everything had its proper time and that they should wait until she was at least an adult. After the procedure, when Shurda returned from the clinic, her mental health was severely impacted. Leon thought that taking walks would help her recover quickly, not realizing she was in a lot of pain. Her emotional recovery needed more time. Shurda eventually overcame the trauma, and their romantic relationship continued. Leon still wanted children but asked her to wait. By the end of 2008, Shurda was in her final year of school, preparing for her exams. At 18, she became pregnant again and told Leon about it. Leon was unhappy once more, but this time, Shurda refused to have another abortion. She was now old enough to make her own decisions. Shurda insisted on keeping the child and decided not to follow Leon's wishes. He agreed. She graduated from school in early 2009 while pregnant. Shurda and Leon decided to get married. Although Leon was uncertain about marriage, they had come too far in their relationship, so they went ahead with the wedding. Shurda had her first child a year later, twin boys. The couple was very happy. After the twins were born, Leon's father passed away, and his mother began to suffer from age-related problems that made it difficult for her to manage the family business. Leon and his brother decided to put their mother in a nursing home so that she could receive proper care. Leon then took full control of the hotel. During this time, he also owned a mining equipment store and a restaurant, both of which were aimed at serving miners by providing food at their workplaces. He also owned rental properties. These ventures generated a good income for the family, allowing them to live comfortably. Due to his heavy workload, Leon decided to involve his wife in the family business. He didn't pressure her, as she had already wanted to start working in business. Leon entrusted her with managing the equipment store. She began handling supplies while caring for their 2 young children, which made managing the business challenging. Although she couldn't take on a large workload, she managed to handle her responsibilities effectively. By this time, the children had grown up and started school. In South Africa, getting an education can be a challenge as not every small town has educational facilities and the quality is often subpar. Ensuring the best quality education often requires daily travel between cities. However, Suritha's family rented a house in a nearby major city for the duration of the children's schooling. Leon decided to send the children to Kakumahi with Suritha. She had to take care of the children herself and give up her business. They only visited Leon on weekends to spend time with him. At first, everything seemed fine, but over time, the distance between the spouses became more apparent. The children couldn't communicate with their father regularly, and Suritha rarely saw her husband. Their relationship grew much colder than it was at the beginning of their marriage. In 2017, Suritha began experiencing health issues. She was diagnosed with cancer, heart problems, and arthritis. She underwent surgery to remove the tumor, which saved her life by preventing the disease from progressing. To address her other health issues, Suritha started traveling to Johannesburg every month to receive special treatments from specialists at a clinic. All of this was funded by Leon, who genuinely wanted to help Suritha and supported her while continuing to manage the business. The biggest challenge during this period was taking care of the children, but the couple solved it by hiring a nanny to help. The family business was very profitable, and Leon's workplace and home were both equipped with safes. Thanks to the extensive business, Leon became wealthy, but at the cost of having to work long hours without days off. In addition, getting rich in a poor country is very dangerous. Because he had unintentionally attracted many people who were jealous of his life. Starting in 2017, Leon encountered problems in his business, which led to many people publicly threatening him. At this time, Leon confided in his wife that he felt unsafe and feared for his life. The couple discussed these issues regularly to ease his anxiety, but the situation did not improve. Gradually, the threats became a regular occurrence. Leon began to ignore the threatening messages, as they came almost every day over trivial matters. A few years later, a terrible tragedy occurred on October 7, 2020. After a brief phone call with Suritha, her husband returned home to check on the dogs. He then stopped communicating, which worried Suritha. She decided to go home to check on him. That day, after arriving home and going inside, the house was strangely quiet and empty. Suritha searched every room and finally discovered Leon's body floating in the pool. In shock, she contacted Leon's brother and then called the police to report her husband's death. Leon's brother and the hotel manager were the first to arrive at the scene of the tragedy, followed shortly by the police. It was clear that Leon's death was no accident. He had been brutally beaten before falling into the pool, suggesting that it was likely a targeted killing. Police quickly noticed that apart from a broken safe, no valuables had been stolen, despite the fact that there were plenty of items worth stealing in the house. This seemed unusual, as thieves usually stole anything of value. The case quickly attracted widespread attention and became a major topic in the South African media. Social networks are full of rumors and speculation. Rumor has it that the businessman has many serious enemies and has received threats. Some say that people who had quarrels with Leon may have been involved in the case. The police receive reports from random people every day, and it takes them a long time to process so many false complaints. Initially, Leon's brother Toki was suspected of being the culprit because he was seen at the crime scene shortly before Leon's death. The suspected motive was their mother's will, which was kept in Leon's safe, and Toki wanted to amend the document for fear of losing his inheritance. At the time, their mother was seriously ill and left a will. The police attempted to prove that there had been serious conflicts between them over the matter, but they were unsuccessful. Toki insisted that there had been no conflict, saying that his meetings with Leon were very normal and that they did not usually argue about money. Toki sought comfort from Shurda, who believed he was innocent and promised to find him the best lawyer. The housekeeper knew about the cameras in the house and informed the police, which gave them access to the footage. They also collected recordings from cameras at the entrance to the house. Briso Shurid, the housekeeper, was brought to the station to help identify the people in the footage. But she was unable to recognize anyone. The police had no solid leads. Leon's brother Toki remains a suspect due to a possible inheritance dispute, but without evidence against him, the case has been dropped. A few months later, Jacques Van Vuren, 37, contacted the police and told the whole truth about Leon's murder. Because the criminal wanted to confess, in exchange for a lighter sentence, and agreed to expose all his accomplices. It turned out that in the Shurda family, things were not as rosy as they seemed. The couple's distance not only cooled their relationship, but also completely destroyed it. One day, Shurda took her husband's mobile phone and discovered photos of other women. At that time, she herself was unfaithful to Leon. Shurda was beautiful and attracted to many men. At the time of her marriage, she had a brief relationship with a lover. But during her medical treatment in Johannesburg, she developed a more serious relationship. She visited her lover every time she went to the hospital for treatment, during which time their relationship deepened. She considered leaving her husband. This seemed pretty straightforward since they lived in separate homes and rarely communicated. Not long after, she asked her husband for a divorce. It is unclear whether she simply wanted to end her relationship with her husband to be with her lover or whether she intended to marry him. Leon did not know about the betrayal, but he was shocked by his wife's desire for a divorce. At first, he reacted very violently and expressed his grief. Then he calmed down and threatened that if she filed for divorce, he would take everything from her, including money and children. Memories of her poor childhood still haunted her. Due to pressure from her husband, Shurda had to give up her plans. She no longer loved her husband Leon, but she did not want to lose everything. In desperation, Shurda turned to her lover, who lived near Johannesburg, to see if he could help her leave her husband. She repeatedly asked him for help, but he refused. He tried to convince her that it was a bad idea. Eventually, she stopped making these requests. One day, Shurda was talking to her lover. During the conversation, she said that she no longer had to worry about her husband because a classmate was willing to help resolve the situation. At first, her lover took these words as a joke and the couple never brought up the subject again. However, it was not a joke. Shurda was actually talking to her classmate, Jacques Van Vuren. At the time, Jacques was going through a difficult time. He had just divorced and his ex-wife had moved out with the children. He had also been injured at work, forcing him to reduce his hours and income. Despite this, he still had to pay child support, which led to serious financial difficulties. In the face of these difficulties, Jacques relapsed into drug addiction, which drove his wife away from him. Shurda and Jacques met again by chance at a barbecue, where he confided in her about his troubles. Shurda decided to take advantage of this opportunity. She had obtained Jacques' phone number. Shurda contacted Jacques. She said that her husband had been abusing her for years, so she wanted to get away from his control. And Jacques believed her. He was extremely disgusted by Leon's behavior. Shurda had reached Jacques' limit, as he had had a difficult childhood. He lived with an abusive father who had physically and mentally abused him, leaving him traumatized, and Saritha's story was effective. Finally, he agreed to help Shurda resolve her situation. She promised to pay 400,000 rand, a large sum that could help Jacques solve all his financial problems. During this time, Leon's business was struggling. His hardware store and restaurant had also closed. The estate was abandoned and did not generate any income. The Leon family had been living off their savings, but with the high costs of maintaining their lifestyle, their financial reserves began to run out. In this context, Leon often quarreled with his wife. Their relationship began to fall apart, which only made the situation worse. Finally, Shertha decided to get rid of her husband again. She contacted Jacques, who asked for half the money in advance. Shertha withdrew 70,000 rand and met Jacques to discuss the plan. She promised to give the remaining money through her housekeeper, who worked for Leon and had moved into her house to help with the housework. The next day, she gave Jacques an envelope containing 1,000 rand. With the deposit, Jacques hired his university friend Enrich Williams. Enrich initially refused to participate in the murder, but due to financial difficulties, when Jacques offered him a large sum of money, he could not resist and agreed. Enrich was 34 at the time and worried that he couldn't handle Leon on his own. So he found a place to stay, Amantal Bariki, a recent college graduate. Amantal, just 24, had studied engineering and dreamed of building his own house. Like many others, he was struggling financially. When he was told of the amount of money involved, Amantal agreed to help. Then the plan entered a careful preparation phase. Shertha filmed a video showing the layout of the house and discussed the attack with the criminals. Shertha let the criminals into the house so they could hide behind a large sofa in the living room. Her role was to lure her husband into the house while she was receiving treatment in Johannesburg. Jacques was not allowed in the area because witnesses could identify him as a friend of the couple. So Enrich and Amantal had to carry out the attack. Shertha insisted that the attack looked like a robbery, so she allowed the criminals to take whatever they wanted from the house. She also asked that Saritha's beloved dogs be kept safe. To distract the dogs, they bought a package of sausages. The sausages were scattered around the yard to lure the dogs away. A rehearsal was scheduled for early October, but was cancelled when Leon's brother Toki visited on October 5th and stayed overnight. The attackers had everything ready and planned to burn clothes and any other evidence after the murder to avoid leaving any clues for the police. While waiting for the signal to start, Jacques tried to calm down. He broke his rule of staying away from the area where Leon would be killed by driving past the house several times before returning to wait for the signal to continue. At around 6 a.m. the next day, while Leon was at work, the attackers entered the house and hid behind the sofa. At 10 a.m., Shertha called Leon to say that, according to the housekeeper, the dogs were missing. Leon needed to go back to look for them, which seemed normal to him, so he returned to the house, unaware that his attackers were waiting inside. As Leon entered the living room and turned around, the attack began. He was stabbed in the back by Amantal with a knife. Despite being caught off guard, Leon fought back. During the struggle, Enrich grabbed a baseball bat and began beating Leon. Leon fell to the ground. He was stabbed 8 times, and then they used a dog collar to strangle him to death before stealing his wallet. They then carried Leon and threw him into the pool. Then went back into the house, opened the safe, and stole money in diamonds. They fled the scene after carrying out their plan. At the time, Shertha was in Johannesburg for treatment, which gave her an alibi. After learning about the incident, Shertha returned home, where she discovered her husband's body. Later, when Shertha was invited to the police station to view the surveillance camera footage, she noticed her old school friend Jacques in the video. Although his face was not visible, the footage captured his car driving suspiciously past their house twice. Shertha did not claim to recognize the car, but the police took notice of it, although the license plate was unclear. While the investigation was ongoing, Shertha used a disposable phone to avoid detection and keep their conversations from being monitored. It turned out that Shertha had provided the police with information regarding Toki and tried to blame him for her husband's death. Shertha had gone to great lengths to play the role of a grieving widow. Even after the funeral, Toki remained unsuspecting and continued to contact Shurtha, supporting her during this difficult time. During this time, Toki began to notice significant changes in Suritha's behavior. She no longer appeared to be a grieving widow. In fact, she had gotten a tattoo, despite Leon's constant objection to her getting one. In addition, Shurtha began riding a motorcycle, which Leon was also adamantly against. She began wearing more revealing and provocative clothing, along with heavy, aggressive makeup, which had always annoyed Leon when he was alive. Despite all these changes, Toki remains unaware of Suritha's involvement in the crime. During this time, Shurtha suffered financial hardship as her family assets were frozen due to the ongoing investigation. She was unable to pay the remaining 200,000 rand to the killers and had no personal savings. The killers became angry and began to threaten her. Jacques regularly contacted her to demand money, but Shurtha continued to delay payment by insisting that the assets were still frozen. The situation became so bad that she hired a bodyguard to move into her home. The bodyguard began helping to look after the children, leading neighbors to assume that he was her new partner. Jacques also received threats from Enrich and Amantel, the killers, as he was responsible for paying the remaining amount to them, but he could not do so without money from Shurtha. On one occasion, Jacques went to visit his sister and received several threats along the way, which made him fearful. Under emotional pressure, he confessed to his sister about the murder, and she informed their mother. His sister then tried to convince him to go to the police and confess, and he finally agreed. This led to the full truth about the murder being revealed. When the police arrived at Suritha's house, she said that she was upset because Leon did not approve her divorce and refused to pay for her medical treatment. However, there was no evidence in their correspondence to substantiate her claims. The possible motive for her decision to kill her husband was that he was planning to sell the dilapidated hotel. She, who had become accustomed to a lavish lifestyle, did not want to sell it. Meanwhile, Leon's main goal in selling the hotel was to pay off his debts and spend more time with his family. He had neglected his children and wife, so he planned to retire and pursue a quieter, more settled life with them. Unfortunately, this decision eventually led to his death. Jacques van Vuren was sentenced to 25 years in prison, eligible for parole in up to 5 years, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. In exchange for his cooperation, he agreed to testify against others involved in the massacre. Enrich Williams and Amantel Bariki were also arrested and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Leon Britz. On March 19, 2021, police arrested Shurtha Britz. She quickly pleaded guilty to murder and armed robbery. As a result, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison for murder and 15 years in prison for armed robbery, both sentences to run concurrently. Because she pleaded guilty, she will have the opportunity to be paroled with minimal restrictions. Throughout the trial, Shurtha portrayed herself as the victim in her relationship with Leon, which began when she was 14 years old. He pressured her to have an abortion and controlled many aspects of her life. Although there was no evidence of physical violence or suffering, the Supreme Court accepted her claims. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Su Shinchi. On July 4, 2009, several lecturers from the finance department of a Chinese university gathered to work overtime to manage and monitor the school's finances and expenses from the previous semester. One lecturer, Tam Xing Fai, 43, was scheduled to attend but was missing. At 11 a.m., a colleague named Ma tried to call Xing Fai's cell phone but received no response. Despite the heavy workload, Ma was not too worried at first. He thought Xing Fai might be taking care of his family's dog, which had a skin disease. Xing Fai had planned to take the dog to the vet, so Ma assumed that was where he was. On July 5th, the university's finance department held a meeting, but Xing Fai failed to attend for the second time. Ma tried calling his cell phone again, but no one answered. Unfortunately, Ma did not have Xing Fai's home phone number, so he could not contact him that way. By July 6th, Xing Fai had been absent from work for 2 days and had not contacted any of his colleagues. Eventually, one of his colleagues reported the situation to the finance department. Xing Fai's supervisors had his home landline number, so they called there, but like his cell phone, no one answered. They called the library where his 33-year-old wife, Helen Tong Yen, worked. Library staff confirmed that she had also been absent from work without permission. The couple lived in Zhongshan, Guangdong Province, China, and had been married for 11 years. They have 2 daughters, the eldest, Tam Hu Man, 10, and the youngest, Tam Hu Wing, 7. Despite their financial difficulties and living in an abandoned recycling station on Waju South Road, they are known to be kind, cheerful, and positive people with well-behaved children. Xing Fai often takes his daughters into town to have fun, leading some to believe that the family went on vacation together. However, something unexpected happened that prevented them from returning home. His colleagues spent quite a while trying to contact him by calling both his cell phone and his home phone, hoping to reach him. Finally, someone answered, but instead of a family member, it was a middle-aged man who was a stranger. The man claimed to be Xing Fai's cousin and said that the family had gone to Dongguan, Guangdong Province, China for the summer vacation. He said that Xing Fai had entrusted his phone to him for safekeeping. When asked when the family would return to Hong Kong, the man could not answer. After repeated inquiries, he hung up and turned off the phone. This call only added to the suspicion and anxiety of his colleagues towards Xing Fai. Xing Fai was always hardworking and responsible, never missing work without a good reason. If he planned to go on vacation with his children, he would make sure their schools were notified in advance. In addition, his family kept 9 stray dogs, raising concerns about who would take care of them if they traveled to the mainland and how they would be able to afford the trip to China. Previously, Xing Fai lived with his parents. His father was a sailor and his mother worked at a paper mill. Unfortunately, his father went missing and was never found, which caused his mother to become ill and eventually end up in a nursing home. Xing Fai's abandonment of her was considered completely out of character for him, especially since he visited her every week. They eventually decided to contact the police. One of Xing Fai's co-workers led the police to Xing Fai's house, which was located at an abandoned recycling station in Pingqi village. During their journey, they saw a short man through the fence of Xing Fai's property. He quickly disappeared from sight, but they didn't think much of it and continued on. When they reached the gate of the house, they found that the door was locked. The police then inspected the property and interviewed the neighbors. The abandoned recycling station covers an area of nearly 450 square meters, of which only 90 square meters are built, leaving nearly 350 square meters as empty flower beds. The construction of the building was not permitted. The previous owner had built several corrugated iron sheds on the site for waste recycling. A stone house next door was used as a pig farm, and there were few residents in the area. As a result, the police were only able to question one neighbor, an elderly woman surnamed Wang, who lived alone across the street. She said she had lived in the area for a long time and was familiar with the family's routine, noting that they often spent their afternoons working in the garden. However, she had little information about their personal lives and commented that the family rarely had visitors due to the isolated nature of the site. The only relative who visited and contacted Xing Fai was Xing Fai's middle-aged cousin, Zhu Wang. Zhu Wang did not have much information about Xing Fai's family. He only knew that Xing Fai's cousin lived in a nearby stone house. Xing Fai's colleague informed the police that his call was answered by Zhu Wang, leading them to believe that he was the one on the other end of the line. However, Zhu Wang said that he did not know the address of Xing Fai or his cousin. Prior to these events, the police went to Xing Fai's house to investigate in Pingqi village. That same day, the police found a man at a stone house on Waju Road number 74. The man, Su Shinchi, 42, confirmed that he was Xing Fai's cousin. He said that he often went to Xing Fai's house to help with renovations and gardening. When asked about the phone call, he said that the family was in China for a vacation. On July 5, Xing Fai visited his mother at the nursing home. He then went home to tell Su about his plans to travel to Dongguan, China for a few days. Su explained that using Xing Fai's Hong Kong mobile phone in mainland China would incur high roaming charges, so he asked Su to keep the phone until he returned. The witness and Xing Fai's colleague who saw him running away was actually Zhu Wang, who had just finished feeding the family dog. Su appeared calm and there were no significant inconsistencies in his testimony. When the police asked Su if he had the keys to the family's house, he said no. The police continued to investigate the area. When the police questioned the villagers about Su, they discovered that he had been dishonest. Villagers confirmed that Su often went to the house to work and could open both the gate and the door himself, even when no one else was there. This suggested that he might have had a key to the house. In fact, he did have a key, as Zhu Wang saw Xing Fai hand the key to Su at the university office, asking Su to get the key for him. Later, when the police returned to Su's house to ask about the key, he denied having the key again. He claimed that he had used the spare key for renovations but had returned it, so he said he could not enter the house. During this interrogation, Su seemed much more nervous than during the first interrogation, and he deliberately avoided important details. When the police threatened to search his house, Su panicked and suddenly remembered that he actually had another house key that he had not returned. He then took the key from the closet and gave it to the police. Although Su's behavior was suspicious, there was no concrete evidence linking him to the family's disappearance, so the police decided to keep an eye on him while they continued their investigation. They used a spare key to enter Xing Fai's home, where they found the interior in disarray, suggesting a break-in. The police also found some fresh blood stains on the walls, suggesting that someone had been murdered in the house. In the kitchen, they found a sink full of dirty dishes, which raised doubts about the idea that the family had traveled to China, as they would not have left the house in such a state. In the couple's master bedroom, the police discovered the family's identity cards in the wardrobe. The police contacted the border office and confirmed that the family had never left Hong Kong. As they continued their search, officers found a bloody shirt in the next room and a bloody plastic water pipe in the corner of the room. Police deployed sniffer dogs to collect more evidence and were able to locate the missing family. The dogs picked up a scent, leading them to bloodstains found under the freshly dug soil. In addition, despite it being summer vacation, the couple's two children, Hiu Man and Hiu Wing, had enrolled in summer school, indicating that the family was not on vacation. A special task force was therefore set up to investigate the case. Police sealed off the scene and blocked the entrances to Pingqi village to outsiders while placing Su Shinchi under house arrest as the prime suspect. Su quickly confessed to the police. He revealed that he was from Huangpu in Guangdong province and usually lived with his sister, wife, and two sons, aged 15 and 16. He used to support himself by selling motorcycles in Junction City, but in 2006, Guangdong imposed a motorcycle ban, which led to a decline in sales. Faced with financial difficulties, he contacted Xing Fai in Hong Kong to seek help in finding a job in the city. Xing Fai helped Su get a construction job that paid 500 Hong Kong dollars a day, including food and accommodation. However, after working for 2 weeks, Su was unhappy because after deductions, he only received 220 Hong Kong dollars. Frustrated, he quit the job without notice and returned to China. In 2007, after Typhoon Pabuk severely damaged his house, Sue returned to Hong Kong because the repair costs were too expensive. He asked Xing Fai to help him find another job in Hong Kong. When Xing Fai couldn't find another job, Shinchi offered to repair the house, do gardening, and do housework around Xing Fai's house. And Xing Fai would pay Sue. Xing Fai agreed to the deal, so every 2 months, Sue would come to Hong Kong to help with housework, mainly gardening and repairing the house. During this time, Sue began to notice Helen Tong Yen, who was later discovered by Xing Fai. On July 3rd, Sue arrived in Hong Kong. 2 days later, on July 5th, Xing Fai took Sue to visit his mother at the nursing home. After the visit, Sue sneaked out to go home first to harass Helen Tong Yen. However, Xing Fai came home earlier than expected and caught him. Enraged, Xing Fai rushed at Sue. In a panic, Sue grabbed a 25-centimeter long fruit knife and stabbed Xing Fai, causing him to collapse in a pool of blood and die. Horrified by what he had just done, Sue considered calling the police. However, he did not. Sue then thought of a way to silence Xing Fai's wife, Helen Tong Yen, and prevent her from calling the police. Sue grabbed some wire from the corner of the room and rushed towards her, knocking her to the ground and tying her hands behind her back. He then covered her mouth and nose with tape and put a plastic bag over her head. Meanwhile, the couple's 2 children were in the bedroom watching cartoons. Helen Tong Yen shouted for them to run away, but instead they ran towards her and found their father dead and Sue attacking their mother. In fear, they ran back to their room, crying and locking the door. Since she was tied up, Sue left Helen Tong Yen behind and chased after the children. Hearing the noise, Human and Huing saw Sue holding a pair of pliers. He pried open the door and used more electric wires to attack both of them. He tied their hands behind their backs, taped their mouths and noses, and put plastic bags over their heads. After leaving the bedroom, he returned to find that both children had stopped breathing. Human and Huing suffocated shortly after. After killing the entire family, Sue was at a loss for what to do next. He returned home to think things over. He felt that hiding the bodies in a ditch or pond would be too easy to discover, and that dismembering them would be tiring and time-consuming. Instead, he decided to bury the bodies in their own home. On July 6th, he returned home to clean up as much blood as possible. He then dug a hole deep and wide enough to fit the bodies of the 4 family members and quickly placed them inside. He also threw the murder weapon into the hole before filling it up. Although he was skeptical of his motives, the police accepted the rest of his testimony. They took Sue back to the house, where he pointed out where a sharp knife, a water pipe, a pair of pliers, and other tools used in the crime were. The fire department was called to assist in exhuming the buried body. Firefighters arrived equipped with digging tools and gas masks, as the bodies were buried near a septic tank. They began digging but soon encountered a significant obstacle: they hit cement. Sue had left out a crucial detail in his confession, pouring cement before covering it up. The firefighters could not determine the thickness of the cement, and since the cement had hardened, their tools were ineffective. The police then hired a private engineering company, which brought in specialized equipment to drill through the concrete slab. When the team drilled into the hole and discovered human hair, they panicked and refused to continue, fearing that they might reach the body. It took the police 13 hours to persuade them to continue. After digging, the hole was 2.54 meters wide and 6 feet deep. They finally discovered the bodies of a family, all barefoot and wearing only t-shirts and shorts. At the bottom was Xing Fai's body, his hands and feet tied with electric wire, with multiple stab wounds to his stomach, back, and neck, and his clothes soaked in blood. Human and Huing's mouths and noses were taped, their hands and feet were tied, and the children's faces looked distorted. Helen Tong Yan's condition was similar. Her face was distorted, her hands and feet were tied, her mouth and nose were covered, and her eyes were covered with transparent tape. Su Shinchi was arrested, and during interrogation, he admitted that he had flirted with a woman. She felt uncomfortable and informed Xing Fai about the incident. Xing Fai becomes angry and kicks Su out of their home, forbidding him from returning. On July 3rd, Su returned home to start work, and his relationship with his cousin seemed to have improved. However, on July 4th, he again behaved inappropriately towards Helen Tong Yan. While Xing Fai was away, Su attempted to molest her. She escaped and locked herself in her room while calling for help. Not wanting to attract the attention of the neighbors, Su angrily left the house. On July 5th, Su and Xing Fai went to the nursing home, but he left first. Anticipating this, Xing Fai returned home early and found Su at his home and was trying to get in to talk to Helen Tong Yan. An argument ensued, and in the heat of the moment, Su stabbed Xing Fai. The rest of his confession was consistent with his initial statement but added the detail that he had filled the makeshift grave with cement. However, after the bodies were sent for autopsy, it became clear that Su's testimony was false. Xing Fai's murder was much more brutal than Su had claimed. Xing Fai had been stabbed 9 times in the head and neck, nearly 80 times in the body, and 10 times in the arms and legs. Instead of being suffocated with a plastic bag, he had been strangled. Forensic investigations showed that the cutlery and dishes in the house did not contain the family's DNA, but did contain Su's DNA. The weapon Su used was not a family kitchen knife, but a knife he owned. Furthermore, the cement used to bury the body had been purchased before the murder, suggesting that the crime was premeditated. Police discovered that bank cards had been used at ATMs after the time of death, but could not be withdrawn due to repeated incorrect PIN entries. In addition, the victim's cash and bank cards were missing, suggesting robbery as the motive behind the crime. Whenever the police pointed out inconsistencies in Su's testimony, he would quickly come up with another explanation. He claimed that his ancestral home in China needed urgent repairs while his 2 children were in school and he needed $100,000 in cash to pay for it. During his visits to Hong Kong, he did not earn much money, which prompted him to seek help from Xing Fai. Su believed that Xing Fai was actually rich but acted like a miser, and he thought that the low wages he received while working for Xing Fai were because they were exploiting him as cheap labor. On July 3rd, Su returned to Hong Kong alone without informing anyone. He waits until July 5th, when Xing Fai has a day off from work. While Xing Fai is at the nursing home, Su, armed with a hidden knife, knocks on his door. When Xing Fai returns and finds Su there, he invites him to cook something while they talk. As soon as Su enters the kitchen, he suddenly asks to borrow 100,000 Hong Kong dollars. Xing Fai refuses and explains to Su that the money was for his mother's medical treatment and his children's education. Su does not want to accept this answer and accuses Xing Fai of just wanting to use him as cheap labor. This accusation angers Xing Fai, and when Su continues to press the issue, Xing Fai tells him to leave. As Xing Fai turns to leave, Su lunges at him, covering his mouth before stabbing him in the back. He then threatened Hiu Man and Hiu Wing, ransacked the house for cash and bank cards, and demanded the card passwords. Xing Fai pretended to provide a fake password, which Su did not realize was invalid at the time. Su also lied about strangling the others and claimed that he killed them by covering their mouths and noses with tape and putting plastic bags over their heads. When Su went to the nearest ATM, he discovered that he had been scammed because his PIN did not work. When he returned home, he discovered that people had suffocated while he was away. Seeing the food he had prepared, he decided to sit and eat next to the 4 corpses while thinking of what to do with them. After stealing 6,000 Hong Kong dollars from Xing Fai, he buried the corpses and the tools he used in a small hole before going to sleep at his stone house. The next morning, Su realized that the smell from the buried corpses might give them away. To prevent this, he went to buy cement, dug up the hole, poured cement in it, and covered it up. He decided to stay at home for a while to answer any calls to Xing Fai's cell phone or home phone, telling anyone who asked that he was keeping an eye on things while they were away on vacation. Su did not expect the deception to be discovered so quickly. Even then, he continued to lie about several details, including how he had purchased cement before the incident and the circumstances surrounding the victims' deaths. At that point, the police were no longer focused on obtaining a true confession, believing they had enough evidence to proceed. The trial took place in the Hong Kong High Court on October 28, 2010, where he pleaded not guilty. He claimed that his previous statement about having an affair with Helen Tong Yen was correct, asserting that he killed her in self-defense and that the deaths of Hiu Man and Hiu Wing were accidental. On November 23, the jury returned a verdict in which Su Shinchi was sentenced to life imprisonment for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter. The judge declared that Su Shinchi had no conscience, was worse than an animal, and had no remorse. He accused Su of fabricating his self-defense testimony and his relationship with Helen Tong Yen, not to receive a lighter sentence, but simply to tarnish their reputations after death. Su Shinchi's family from Hong Kong defended him against Xing Fai's accusations, claiming that Xing Fai was a hypocrite and the real villain, using Su as cheap labor and taking a portion of his wages. This defense angered neighbors and residents of Ping Chi village, forcing Su's family to return to China to escape the negative backlash. The crime itself was one of the most shocking in Hong Kong's history. Tam Xing Fai's family received a significant outpouring of support, with many people visiting to offer their condolences and netizens donating enough money to pay for the funeral. In addition, the family's 9 stray dogs were adopted by another family and taken for a walk every July 5 near their old home. On August 9, 2022, Su Shinchi died of liver cancer at the age of 55 in Stanley Prison, Hong Kong. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jason Corbett. Jason Corbett, a 39-year-old Irish businessman, Jason has a warm, friendly personality. Born in Limerick, Ireland, Jason has a twin brother named Wayne and an older sister named Tracy. He married Margaret Fitzpatrick in 2003 when he was 27. They later welcomed 2 children, a son named Jack and a daughter named Sarah, whom they loved dearly. Jason's family seemed to be living a happy life in Ireland, but this happiness was short-lived. Tragedy struck in 2006, shortly after Sarah was born. Margaret suffered a severe asthma attack one night, waking Jason up because she was having trouble breathing. Jason immediately tried to help her by giving her medication and using her inhaler, but her condition quickly worsened. In a panic, Jason called an ambulance, but unfortunately, Margaret died on the way to the hospital. Jason Corbett was the director of a small packaging company in Ireland when he lost his wife, leaving him to raise his 2-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter alone. His friends witnessed his deep sadness and struggled to cope with the loss. A year after his wife's death, Jason was looking for a nanny and housekeeper to care for his children. This led him to Molly Martins, a 25-year-old American woman. In March 2008, Molly moved from the United States to Ireland to take up a nanny job. A friend of Jason's accompanied him to the airport to pick Molly up. The friend immediately became concerned that Molly might not be suitable for the job. Molly's youthful appearance, flashy style, and heavy makeup aroused suspicion. With her bright jacket, cowboy boots, curly hair, and heavy makeup, Molly looks more like a stage performer than a responsible nanny and maid. Molly was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. After attending Clemson University for a while, she dropped out and decided to start a new life in Ireland. There, she worked as a nanny for Jason's family, taking care of his two children, Jack and Sarah. Molly immediately took to the children, showing them care and concern. Jason's friends noticed a significant change in him. He seemed to be coming back to life after a period of grief. As Molly and Jason's relationship deepened, love blossomed and they began dating. The family of four went on vacations together, which brought them closer together. They began to plan for their future as a family. 2 years later, on Valentine's Day 2010, Jason took Molly to a coffee shop, where he proposed to her with a ring. Overjoyed, Molly immediately began planning their wedding in the United States. She also convinced Jason to leave Ireland and move to the United States with her, and he agreed. In 2011, Jason sold his house, moved to the United States for work, and the family settled in Davidson County, North Carolina. The couple married in a beautiful ceremony attended by friends and family from both the United States and Ireland. After the wedding, Molly worked as a swimming instructor. But her main focus was raising Jack and Sarah. Jason, on the other hand, worked as a manager in the United States. At first, their life seemed perfect, but as time went on, their marriage began to fall apart. On August 1, 2015, Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martins, visited Jason's family home, where he greeted them at the entrance and helped them with their luggage. Tom had brought a gift for Jason's son, Jack, a baseball bat, but Jack was out with friends at the time. Instead, Jason, Molly, her parents, and Sarah had dinner together, eating pizza. Jack returned home late that night, but Tom decided to wait until the next morning to give him the baseball bat. After 11 p.m., the family went to bed. Molly and Jason were in the master bedroom on the first floor, while their children, Jack and Sarah, were in nearby rooms. Molly's parents were upstairs in the living room. Hours later, at 3 a.m., Molly's father, Tom, called 911 in a panic. He claimed that Jason had attacked his daughter, Molly, and in response, Tom had hit Jason with a baseball bat. Jason was now unconscious and bleeding. During the call, Tom expressed his fear that Jason's severe head injuries could be fatal and urgently requested an ambulance to their location. Tom asked the 911 operator for help, and she instructed Tom and Molly to perform CPR to try to revive Jason until paramedics arrived. When the police and ambulance arrived, they found Molly in the yard near a car, looking distressed and shocked but not crying. Inside the house, they discovered Jason Corbett's body in the master bedroom, surrounded by blood splattered on the bed, walls, and floor. Tom and Molly both had blood on their clothes. A baseball bat and a large pebble with blood on them were found near Jason, along with an overturned lamp. Jack and Sarah had been sleeping in their room during the incident. At the police station, Tom Martins, 66, a 30-year veteran of the FBI, stated that his son-in-law was mentally unstable and had been abusing his daughter. According to Tom, Jason had been drunk that night. Everyone had gone to bed, but Tom was awakened in the middle of the night by screams and loud voices coming from downstairs. He quickly got out of bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and ran down the stairs. When Tom entered the master bedroom, he found Jason strangling Molly with both hands. Tom yelled, "Let her go." In response, Jason turned to him and said, "I'm going to kill her." Tom and Molly did not deny their involvement in Jason's death but claimed they had acted in self-defense. Tom immediately felt the need to protect himself and those around him. He swung the baseball bat at Jason, but the blow seemed to have no effect. When Jason tried to drag Molly into the bathroom, Tom intervened, trying to stop him. The situation worsened when Jason pushed Tom, causing him to fall and his glasses to fly off. At this point, Tom felt his life was in danger. Jason then spotted the baseball bat on the floor and reached for it. Molly quickly responded by grabbing a rock and hitting Jason in the head, yelling, "Don't touch my dad," as she did so. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Tom picked up the baseball bat and repeatedly hit Jason until he fell to the floor. Molly, 32, provided a consistent account of events during her interview. She explained that her daughter Sarah woke up with a nightmare that night, which caused Jason to become angry and attack her. Jason allegedly began strangling Molly, threatening to kill her, and her father intervened to protect her. In order to protect her father, Molly claimed to have hit Jason on the head with a heavy rock. When asked where she got the rock, Molly replied that she had placed it on her bedside table. The rock had originally been used for drawing pictures with children as part of a gardening project, but Molly could not remember exactly how many times she had hit Jason, describing the incident as a desperate fight for her life. During her interview, Molly told police that she was still in pain from the alleged strangling incident. Photos of Molly, which showed a red mark in the middle of her neck, were compared to photos taken of her when she was arrested. However, the comparison did not reveal any red marks on her neck at the time of her arrest. Molly later admitted that the fight with her husband had actually occurred the day before the tragedy, in which Jason had grabbed her arm and neck. During questioning, she repeatedly complained of a sore throat. Both Molly and her father, Tom, testified that Jason had abused his wife, but Jason's family disputed these claims. Jason's sister, Tracy, noticed that Molly was controlling of Jason, often becoming upset if things did not go her way. She also noticed that Molly did not want to socialize with Jason's family members when they visited. Additionally, one of Molly's friends shared a disturbing claim that Molly had claimed to be friends with Jason's first wife, Margaret, until her death. However, this contradicted the family's account, as they knew Margaret had died of an asthma attack, not cancer. Despite Jason's relatives' warnings and attempts to intervene about Molly's unusual behavior, the wedding still takes place, marking the beginning of a complicated and troubled marriage. Over time, Molly's behavior began to raise concerns. Jason noticed a major change in her personality and suspected that she might have mental health issues. She was initially kind and loving, but now seemed manipulative and controlling. This worried Jason and led to more problems in their relationship. Molly began distancing herself from Jason's family by cutting her phone calls to just seconds. Before her death, Jason took steps to protect his children, Jack and Sarah. He named his sister, Tracy, as their legal guardian in case anything happened to him. Tracy knew that if Jason died, Molly would have custody of the children. After Jason's death, Tracy traveled to North Carolina to file for custody, preparing for a legal battle with Molly. During her troubled marriage to Jason, Molly consulted with an attorney to understand her rights to Jason's children in the event of a divorce. The lawyer suggested that she record their arguments and gather evidence that could be used against Jason. As a result, Molly began secretly recording their conversations. In these recordings, Molly appeared unresponsive, often ignoring Jason's repeated questions as his voice grew louder. After Jason's death, Molly confided in a close friend about her marital problems, describing Jason as controlling and abusive. She accused him of forcing her to have sex, verbally abusing her, and becoming increasingly aggressive toward her over time. Despite this, Molly never reported Jason's behavior to the police. For days after Jason's death, his 10-year-old son Jack and 8-year-old daughter Sarah were interviewed by a child welfare specialist. During the conversation, they shared their thoughts about their parents' relationship. The children described seeing their mother, Molly, being careful not to wake their father, Jason, for fear of him getting angry. Jack described a pebble on his parents' bedside table, explaining that they had brought it in because it was raining and planned to decorate it later. Both Jack and Sarah described witnessing arguments between them. According to the children, their father, Jason, often initiated these arguments, which included hitting, pushing, and swearing at his mother, Molly, over trivial matters. Jason's autopsy report found that he died of traumatic brain injury. He had suffered approximately 12 severe blows to the head with a baseball bat and a rock, all concentrated in the same area. The injuries were so severe that his scalp was torn away from his skull and his skull was fractured. A toxicology report found that Jason's blood alcohol level was slightly higher than normal at the time of his death. He also had traces of trazodone, an antidepressant commonly prescribed to treat insomnia, in his body. Jason was buried in his hometown of Limerick, Ireland, next to his first wife, Margaret. After Jason's death, his sister, Tracy, took their children, Jack and Sarah, to Ireland, which left Molly shocked and heartbroken. She tried to contact Jack and Sarah by phone and social media. Molly and Tom claimed they acted in self-defense against Jason, but the investigation into his death continues. Tracy has another theory. She thinks Molly killed Jason because he planned to leave her and take their children. Tracy believes that Jason told Molly about his decision on the night of the incident, and Molly, afraid of being alone, reacted violently. In Ireland, Jack and Sarah slowly adjust to their new lives. 9 months after their father's death, they revealed that they were forced to lie about domestic violence. They admit that Molly made up stories about their father's violent behavior, threatening to cut them off if they did not comply. The children clarify that their father had never abused Molly, contrary to what they had initially said. During the investigation, Molly's past relationship with her ex-husband Keith Megan came to light. Keith shared some revealing details about Molly's past. The two met on a dating website and quickly fell in love, moving in together just 6 weeks later. Keith described Molly as independent, fun-loving, carefree and unconventional. However, she eventually confided in him about her struggles with bipolar disorder. Keith was not overly concerned by the revelation, as Molly was on medication and appeared to be fine, apart from occasional changes in her behavior when she missed a dose. These changes did not manifest as violence or outbursts, but rather as clingy behavior during arguments, such as refusing to let Keith leave. Additionally, Molly would often spend hours in the bath, followed by periods of sitting on the cold floor and crying. Despite the difficulties they faced, Keith and Molly continued their life together and decided not to have children at that time. However, Molly soon revealed that she was pregnant, which took Keith by surprise. As the sole breadwinner, Keith was struggling financially and did not feel ready to become a father. Keith eventually proposed to Molly and she happily accepted, but due to her health problems, Molly continued to take prescription medication, including antidepressants, sometimes up to 16 pills a day. This caused Keith to worry about the effects of the medication on their unborn child. In a tragic turn of events, Molly had a dream that she had lost her baby, and the next day the hospital confirmed that the fetus had died. The loss put further strain on their relationship. Molly fell into a state of grief and was diagnosed with major depression. Her parents began to view Keith negatively, seeing him as the cause of Molly's problems. Molly planned to leave Keith in the United States to find work as a nanny for the family in Europe. In March 2008, she packed her things and moved out of the apartment they were sharing. 10 days later, she called Keith, telling him that she was in Ireland, had found a job, and was doing well. This was the last time they spoke. Years later, in October 2015, Keith received an email from a police officer in North Carolina revealing that Molly had kept her relationship with Keith and her move to Europe a secret. The email informed Keith that Molly's new husband, Jason Corbett, had been murdered. When Keith watched an interview with Molly and her father, Tom, they described Jason as a cruel person, but Keith did not believe their story. He thought their feelings seemed fake. In January 2016, Tom and Molly were charged with second-degree murder in Jason's death. At their trial in July 2017, Tom and Molly claimed they had acted in self-defense when they killed Jason. Tom said he had tried everything he could to keep himself and Molly safe. Tom admitted to beating Jason with a baseball bat, only stopping when he was sure Jason was no longer a threat. However, the prosecution argued that the severity of the attack showed a deep hatred for Jason rather than self-defense. Analysis of the bloodstains showed that some of the blows were delivered when Jason's head was between 30 and 50 centimeters above the ground, suggesting that Tom continued to attack even after Jason was no longer a threat. The presence of stains on Molly's nightgown near the area where Jason was struck suggests that she was nearby during the attack. During the trial, Lieutenant Frank Young testified about the injuries he observed on Tom and Molly on the night of the incident. He stated that Molly had self-inflicted wounds to her neck, telling her to stop while he was taking notes on her injuries. Other than some dried blood on her face and hair, Lieutenant Young found no other injuries on Molly. Tom also had no injuries, only blood on his watch and under his fingernails. Notably, his glasses were not broken. Paramedic Amanda Hackworth also took the stand and described what she found when she arrived at the scene. When she examined Jason's body, she found that his torso was cold to the touch and had patches of dried blood. This contradicts Molly's statement that they called 911 immediately after Jason became unconscious. The police investigation discovered that Jason had a life insurance policy, with Molly listed as the beneficiary. Furthermore, it was revealed that Jason had financially supported Molly's parents. A neighbor of Jason's family testified at the trial. He recalled spending an evening with Jason from 3:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., drinking beer together. According to the neighbor, Jason seemed very relaxed at the time. The neighbor also witnessed Tom and his wife arriving at Jason's house and noted that Jason warmly welcomed them and helped them carry heavy luggage into the house. After 9 days of witness testimony, listening to arguments, and viewing haunting crime scene photos, the jury reached a verdict within 3 hours. The court found Molly Corbett and her father, Tom Martins, guilty of second-degree murder. Molly was sentenced to 20 years in prison, while her father was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As the verdict was read, Molly turned to her mother, expressing remorse. "Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of the Raman family." Jean-Claude Raman was born on February 11, 1954 in Laos, France, and grew up in Claques, Jura. He received his baccalaureate in 1971. He began his studies at Lycée du Parc in Lyon but dropped out after 1 semester. He then enrolled in medical school. Florence Cray was born on March 6, 1956. She pursued a medical degree at the University of Lyon, where she met Jean-Claude Raman, a distant cousin of her family. Initially, they didn't have a strong connection and barely spent time together. However, through mutual friends and study sessions, they gradually grew closer. Jean-Claude was attracted to Florence and he made an effort to win her over. In return, Florence considered him an ordinary person, not particularly outstanding. Her ideal partner was someone who combined the typical qualities of a doctor: intelligent, charming, and attractive. After failing her second exam, Florence decided to switch from medicine to pharmacy. Jean-Claude and her friend Luc Ladmiral also supported her decision. The three of them maintained the habit of studying, taking exams, and supporting each other for a long time, finally graduating in 1980. Florence and Jean-Claude then married, and 6 years later they welcomed their first daughter, Caroline. 2 years later they had a son, Antoine, after Caroline was born. Florence lived a normal life as a wife and mother, working part-time locally to support her family. Her husband, Jean-Claude Raman, worked for the World Health Organization in Geneva, near their home in France. In late December 1992, Florence was out running errands in Fère, France. Her children, Caroline and Antoine, were at school, and Jean-Claude was at work in Geneva. It was a normal day, with Florence still thinking about their recent Christmas celebrations. While she was out, she met the school principal. They exchanged holiday greetings and began discussing their Christmas experiences. The conversation eventually turned to an incident involving Florence's husband. The principal mentioned that the principal had been demoted due to an affair with a teacher, which led to a school board meeting. Her husband, Jean-Claude, also served on the school board, so the principal wanted to discuss the matter with Jean-Claude, so the principal's secretary tried to find Jean-Claude's contact information in the World Health Organization directory, since Jean-Claude worked there. However, Jean-Claude's name was not found, which the principal found strange. Florence laughed it off, but she was also curious. Florence assured the principal that there must be a good reason why Jean-Claude's name and phone number were not listed, and she promised to raise the matter with Jean-Claude when he got home from work. Jean-Claude and his acquaintances have lost touch. He keeps his professional life private, sharing very little with family and friends. His wife, Florence, believes he is a respected researcher in the medical field, but she knows little about his work, and Florence does not even have his office phone number. If Florence needed to contact him urgently, she would page him, and he would call her back as soon as possible. When friends asked Florence about Jean-Claude's role at the World Health Organization, WHO, she would laugh and admit that she wasn't sure. Sometimes, she would jokingly speculate that he might be a secret spy. In 1992, Florence discovered that the WHO hosted an annual Christmas tree event where staff members could bring their families to decorate a tree together. What surprised her was that Jean-Claude had never mentioned this event to her. Florence was deeply disturbed by the recent events surrounding her husband. First, the school president revealed that her husband was not listed in the WHO directory, despite his claims of working there. Then, she discovered that a significant family event had taken place at his workplace over a decade ago, which he had never mentioned to her. These discoveries likely weighed heavily on Florence's mind. However, during the holiday season, Florence's brother visited the family and noticed a profound sadness surrounding Florence. As the new year, 1993, began, Florence and Jean-Claude spent time together, going shopping. During their outing, Florence insisted that Jean-Claude buy himself a new suit. On January 5th, Jean-Claude withdrew a total of 2,000 francs from 2 different ATMs. He then gave 500 francs to a homeless person he met before going to a gun store. At the gun store, Jean-Claude purchased tear gas canisters, cartridges, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun wand. Jean-Claude returned home, however, on January 11th at 4 a.m., a frantic call was made to the fire brigade, reporting a fire at the house. Garbage collectors on their early morning rounds discovered the house on fire and immediately alerted the fire brigade. The firefighters rushed to the scene and began extinguishing the flames. While they were working, they noticed someone moving in the upstairs bedroom window, indicating that the person was seeking help. Medical personnel were called, and the person, who was Jean-Claude, was rescued from the burning house. After being rescued, Jean-Claude was found unresponsive and in shock. Paramedics immediately attended to him, and he was taken to the hospital, where he eventually fell into a coma. The fire was quickly extinguished, allowing first responders to enter the premises. A family friend, Dr. Luc Ladmiral, was called to the scene and was met with the devastating sight of the charred remains of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence being carried out on stretchers. When a household fire results in fatalities, the police typically launch an investigation to determine the cause of the fire and rule out any potential criminal activity. In this case, due to the significant loss of a prominent doctor's family, law enforcement authorities began an investigation into the tragic fire at the Raman residence. During the examination of Florence's remains, the medical team found evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her skull, which raised suspicions and sparked an investigation. Further examination revealed that Florence did not die from the fire, but from the blunt force trauma. The examination of the children also yielded a disturbing discovery. Caroline and Antoine did not die in the fire, but were shot hours before the fire started. This new information indicates that the cause of death occurred before the house caught fire. As a result, the police have opened an investigation into the suspicious deaths of Florence and her children. However, Jean-Claude is in a coma and unable to provide any information, so the police have to look for other leads. Florence's home became a crime scene and police began interviewing relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors to find out what had happened to the family. As part of the investigation, police also contacted Luc Ladmiral, the doctor who witnessed the victims being taken from the scene. Luc had no idea what was going on, and Luc had no clue who the Florence family had enemies when asked by the police. Luc still couldn't think of anyone who might want to harm them. However, Luc was asked to come in for questioning again a few days later. During this questioning, the police asked Luc about the family's relationships and any recent events that might have led to the fire. After a thorough questioning, the police still couldn't find any reason to believe that the family had any enemies or that anything unusual had happened before the fire. The investigation then turned to Jean-Claude, and what they discovered was horrifying. Jean-Claude had never actually worked for the World Health Organization, nor had he ever lectured at the University of Dijon. In fact, he wasn't even a qualified doctor. Luc is initially skeptical, but as he thinks back to his time studying with Jean-Claude, he begins to realize that something is wrong. Luc recalls a specific incident from his second year when Jean-Claude was absent from an exam, and Luc visited Jean-Claude at home and found him unwell, with clammy skin, a pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude confided in Luc that he was battling lymphoma, a cancer that had been under control but worsened by the stress of the exam. Luc promised to keep this a secret, especially from Florence, as Jean-Claude had asked him to. The police were unable to obtain any significant information from Luc, so they decided to wait for the results of the forensic tests on the victims. The police noticed several unusual things about the house. All the doors were locked from the inside, indicating that no one had broken in. At first, the main theory was that the fire was an accident. However, the condition of the bodies made them consider other possibilities. The findings pointed to a more complex and sinister scenario, therefore, it was necessary to interrogate Jean-Claude. Since Jean-Claude had been in a coma for several weeks, the police made him their prime suspect and conducted a full investigation during that time. After verifying with the university, it was found that Jean-Claude had spent 12 years studying, passing his first-year exams but failing those in the second year. Since there were no restrictions on re-enrollment, Jean-Claude kept signing up for the second year, attending classes and studying medical texts for over a decade. What was puzzling was that he never managed to pass the second-year exam. Jean-Claude's uncle went to his parents' house to break the tragic news. When Jean-Claude's uncle entered the house, he found the bodies of Jean-Claude's mother and father dead, both shot with the same gun used to kill Antoine and Caroline. An autopsy confirmed that the gun was the same, and the estimated time of death suggested that the murders were related. The situation becomes even more mysterious after the tragedies become public. The police receive an anonymous call from a woman. She is reluctant to get involved in the investigation but has important information to share. She reveals that she had a romantic relationship with Jean-Claude after meeting him in Paris. She was also told that he was a researcher at the World Health Organization. The woman was misled into believing that Jean-Claude was involved in and funding major research projects. He also presented himself as having a significant position in Geneva's banks, making them seem very attractive. Jean-Claude convinced her to invest in a Swiss bank by offering an unusually high 18% interest rate. The woman eventually agreed to give Jean-Claude 990,000 francs to invest, expecting to receive her returns after 3 months. As the deadline approached in early January, she reminded Jean-Claude of their agreement, stressing that she urgently needed the funds to support herself and her family. After negotiating, Jean-Claude invited the woman to dinner with a well-known politician, which sparked her interest in recovering her investment. On the agreed day, Jean-Claude picked her up in Paris, and they began their journey. However, as night fell, they found themselves lost on the road. Jean-Claude suddenly stopped the car and attacked the woman with tear gas, a stun wand, and a cable in an attempt to subdue her. Despite being caught off guard, the woman fought back fiercely and managed to escape the vehicle. Jean-Claude chased after her but stopped when she begged for mercy. After his plan failed, Jean-Claude begged for forgiveness and used a familiar excuse with the woman, claiming that his lymphoma was acting up, causing his erratic behavior. The woman agreed not to talk about the incident. As the police looked into Jean-Claude, they began to see him as a con man and a manipulator. When Jean-Claude awoke from his coma, he was immediately approached by the police, who wanted him to confess, but Jean-Claude chose to remain silent. With a blank expression, he stared into space, reluctant to speak when the police asked him about the events of January 9th, the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, Florence's serious injuries, and the discovery of his dead parents. Despite repeated questioning, Jean-Claude revealed nothing. The truth about Jean-Claude's life was finally revealed to the police. That's when he decided to break his silence. The reasons for this sudden change are still unclear, but it marked the beginning of him speaking out. On the evening of January 9th, Jean-Claude and his wife Florence spent a typical night at home. After putting their children to bed, they went to their bedroom. However, Jean-Claude's memories of that night are unclear until he recalls a disturbing scene, finding his wife lying in a pool of blood on their bed, with a bloodied rolling pin in his hand. Confused about what had happened, Jean-Claude claims he didn't remember if an argument had occurred. He then went to sleep beside his wife's body. The next morning, he woke up and prepared breakfast for their children, Caroline and Antoine. He served them cereal and joined them to watch TV. When the children asked about their mother, Jean-Claude told them she was unwell and needed to rest. After breakfast, Jean-Claude urged Caroline to go upstairs to her bedroom. Jean-Claude then took out a .22 caliber rifle, equipped with a silencer, and shot his 7-year-old daughter Caroline in the back of the head, killing her. His son Antoine also met a similar tragic end. After the shootings, Jean-Claude left the house and went about his daily routine, appearing normal to those around him. He bought newspapers and watched television at home. However, Jean-Claude received a phone call from his parents inviting him to lunch, which he accepted. Jean-Claude drove to his parents' home and joined them for lunch. After lunch, Jean-Claude asked his father to go upstairs with him, saying Jean-Claude needed help with a faulty boiler pipe. Jean-Claude's elderly father checked the pipe at Jean-Claude's request. However, Jean-Claude shot his father in the back. He then went downstairs to his mother and shot her. Before leaving, Jean-Claude also shot the family dog. During the trial, when questioned about this, Jean-Claude showed a hint of remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears, explaining that the dog was cherished by his children and reminded him of Caroline. This moment led Jean-Claude to decide to return home and take his own life. But his plan did not go as intended. Jean-Claude's former lover gave him 990,000 francs for an investment scheme, which he used to support himself. Jean-Claude told many people, including Florence's relatives and family, about the high returns from his investments, and they trusted him because they knew him. Jean-Claude gradually amassed a large sum of money from those who trusted him. To avoid detection by the tax authorities and others, Jean-Claude transferred the money to accounts in his own name in Geneva. Meanwhile, Jean-Claude managed the family finances, keeping his fraudulent activities a secret from Florence. Eventually, the inevitable happened, and it was time for Jean-Claude to face the consequences of his actions. As expected, the those who had invested with Jean-Claude began to demand their money back, along with the promised returns. Despite having amassed over 2 million francs, Jean-Claude spent it all as soon as he had it to cover immediate expenses, leaving Jean-Claude with little to no savings. The inevitable day came when Jean-Claude had to confess the truth to Florence and the others who had entrusted him with money. Jean-Claude could no longer maintain the lie he had created. Feeling trapped and overwhelmed, he believes that ending his family's lives is a way to protect them from the consequences of his fraud. Jean-Claude then plans to commit suicide to avoid facing the reality of his situation. On June 23, 1996, Jean-Claude's trial began. Throughout the trial, Jean-Claude remained largely silent, sitting behind a glass partition with police on either side. On July 2, the court delivered its verdict. Jean-Claude was found guilty of murdering his wife, children, and parents. He was given a life sentence with no chance of parole for 22 years. After serving time in prison, Jean-Claude claimed to have become a devout Christian and expressed remorse for his actions. In 2019, Jean-Claude requested to be released from prison to live in a convent, where he could spend the rest of his life in repentance. The judge agreed to Jean-Claude's request. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sierra Lamar. In March 2012, the Lamar family, consisting of Steve, a computer expert, his wife Marlene, and their two daughters, Danielle and Sierra, living in Fremont, California. Sierra was younger sister. She was born on October 19, 1996. Both girls had a relatively comfortable upbringing, with the usual ups and downs that come with family life. However, a disturbing fact about their father's past had a profound impact on the family. When Danielle and Sierra were younger, their father, Steve, was involved in a serious incident involving inappropriate behavior with one of their roommates during a sleepover. As a result, Steve was sentenced to 1 year in prison. Despite Steve's past convictions, both Sierra and Danielle reported having a good relationship with him, describing him as a kind and respected father. However, when Marlene learned about the incident, they decided to end their relationship, which was already struggling. Marlene soon moved on and started a new relationship. Despite this, both Sierra and Danielle attended Washington High School in their community, where they enjoyed socializing and performed reasonably well academically. Sierra was a cheerful and lively girl who was well-liked at school. She enjoyed participating in dance competitions and cheerleading. In October 2011, her mother, Marlene, decided to move from Fremont to Morgan Hill, a town located 40 miles southwest. Sierra, her mother, and her mother's boyfriend, Rick Gardner, settled into a rented ranch-style home on a rural cul-de-sac. However, Sierra was initially unhappy about leaving behind her close friends and hobbies in Fremont. She struggled to adjust to her new school, Sobrato High, where she didn't receive the same warm welcome she had at Washington High. Despite this, Sierra eventually settled in and made new friends, earning the respect and even joining the cheerleading squad again. By March 2012, Sierra had adapted well to her new environment. On March 11th, she had a conversation with her father and her sister, who still lived in Fremont, and updated them on her progress. The conversation was mostly positive, with Sierra expressing excitement about an upcoming school project, wanting to get her hair colored, and discussing her homework with her sister. Her academic performance seemed to be going well. Sierra ended her Thursday evening chat with Danielle and Steve after dinner, as she had school the next day and it was getting late. They agreed to part ways and promised to catch up soon, unaware that this would be their last conversation. The next morning, February 16, 2012, Sierra got ready for school, locking the house behind her. At 6:29 a.m., she tweeted a friend, then put on her shoes and left to catch the bus. The bus stop was located on a desolate road between Palm and Dewey Avenues, far from Sierra's school, Sobrato High. Many students, including Sierra, had to cross this road daily to catch the bus. At 7:11 a.m., Sierra texted a friend to meet up before class. However, when the bus arrived at 7:11 and 15 seconds a.m., Sierra was missing. Sierra didn't show up to school, which her friends found unusual. However, they didn't think it was serious enough to report to the school authorities. The day went on as usual. When the school day ended, Marlene, Sierra's mom, tried to contact Sierra, but her call went straight to voicemail. Although Marlene thought this was strange, she didn't get worried. However, when she got home and saw that Sierra's room was still empty, she realized that something was amiss. She contacted Steve to ask if Sierra was planning to visit him in Fremont again. Unfortunately, the answer was no. When Marlene called Danielle and a few other friends, they all left with the same message that Sierra could not be found. Marlene began to panic when she called Sierra's high school and discovered that she had missed all her classes. After her calling the authorities, officers were immediately sent to the pedo-Hispanic court. They began by speaking with those closest to Sierra, including several of her friends, who were all candid about the difficulties Sierra and her family were facing. Although Sierra was generally content, it had only been a few months since her mother's divorce forced her to leave her family and old friends behind. Authorities initially thought that Sierra might have left voluntarily, as she had previously mentioned returning to Fremont in a light-hearted and sometimes serious manner. However, there were several things that contradicted this theory. Sierra had stopped posting on social media, her phone was turned off, and all calls went straight to voicemail. She also never arrived at the front door of her home. Her loved ones launched a massive search despite police downplaying her disappearance. The investigation into Sierra's disappearance led to a complex trail of evidence. 2 days after she vanished, data forensics began examining her phone's previous activity. They discovered that her phone had briefly turned on in the middle of the night, before turning off again. The phone's coordinates pointed to a field near Sierra's house, which became a crucial lead in the investigation. A search crew thoroughly searched the fields where Sierra's phone had last been detected. Within minutes, they found the Samsung Galaxy phone she had been using. It was near the road, damaged, and had likely been thrown from a vehicle. Investigators concluded that Sierra hadn't turned on her phone that evening. Instead, they believed that rain had caused a false signal, briefly activating her phone. This coincidence was crucial, as the entire investigation hinged on the discovery of her phone. The case took a disturbing turn when detectives realized that Sierra's phone was probably thrown from a moving vehicle. There were no footprints, tire tracks, or other visible evidence. The next day, a search crew made another discovery. Sierra's backpack was found 2 kilometers from her house, discarded outside a barn. The bag contained her schoolwork, inhaler, and money, suggesting that she had been on her way to school and was forcibly separated from her essential items. Additionally, a complete outfit, believed to be the one Sierra was wearing the morning she vanished, was found in her luggage. This outfit included her pullover, pants, socks, shoes, and even undergarments. The outfit was subjected to DNA testing, which yielded results. Specifically, her pants contained male foreign DNA, suggesting that she had likely been assaulted. The discovery of Sierra's phone and clothing led to a surge of local and international sympathy. The search effort, which had already intensified significantly in the days following her disappearance, received a fresh wave of support. Authorities received over 1,000 new tips, and officers worked more than 7,000 hours. Multiple search teams, comprising over 800 individuals, were deployed to thoroughly search the area. They systematically examined every available lake and reservoir, combed over fields, and searched abandoned buildings. Sierra's disappearance was a major topic of discussion in the community, with missing person posters put up everywhere. Her parents offered a $10,000 reward for any credible information leading to her safe return. Despite the efforts of the community and investigators, only a golf ball and a flipper were found. However, unbeknownst to the public, investigators were making progress in identifying a potential suspect. 12 days after Sierra's disappearance, on March 28, DNA analysis revealed that the DNA on her pants belonged to a local man. As part of the investigation, DNA samples from all 57 registered sex offenders in the Morgan Hill zip code were compared to the DNA evidence. Sierra's father, who had a criminal record, proactively contacted law enforcement and was quickly eliminated as a suspect. One of the local men who had not been ruled out as a suspect was Antolin Garcia Torres. Following a DNA match between the 21-year-old man and Sierra's pants, he came to public attention. At the time, he lived in Maple Leaf Recreational Vehicle Park with his mother, pregnant wife, and daughter, about 7 miles from Sierra's house. Antolin Garcia Torres had a troubling past, had a challenging upbringing marked by abuse and neglect. His father, who was abusive and often drunk, had threatened to kill him and his mother before being imprisoned for molesting a young family member. The father's abusive behavior appears to have been passed on to his son. Although 2009 allegations of having sex with a minor were dismissed, Antolin Garcia Torres's DNA was collected. He was also detained in 2010 for impeding police operations. Due to the suspicious relationship between he and Sierra, detectives put him under constant surveillance. As it was unclear whether Sierra was still alive, Antolin Garcia Torres was the most likely person to have information. To monitor his activities, police tapped his phone, placed a GPS tracker in his car, and had 2 undercover investigators move into a vehicle park next to his house. After discovering that the vehicle park had cameras at the front door, investigators began reviewing security footage from the neighborhood around Antolin Garcia Torres's residence. They examined the film taken on the day of Sierra's disappearance to determine whether Antolin had left or arrived home. It was discovered that Antolin had left the campground in his red Volkswagen Jetta at 7 a.m. on the morning she vanished. Given that his home was only 7 miles from Sierra, Antolin's travel time matched the period during which Sierra could have been kidnapped. Although Antolin had left for work at the usual time, Safeway's shift records showed that he did not arrive at work on Sierra went missing. It was found that 3 years prior, there were 3 unsuccessful kidnapping attempts in the Safeway parking lot. But none of the perpetrators were identified or detained. The only evidence from these attempts was a taser dropped by the perpetrator, which had a fingerprint on one of its batteries. However, it was only a partial fingerprint, requiring a direct one-to-one comparison to match. The idea seemed promising, but when Antolin's fingerprints were compared to those on the taser, a surprising revelation emerged. In reality, their suspect was indeed Antolin. Antolin was taken into custody by investigators after being positively identified as someone who was present when Sierra went missing. His DNA was found on her pants, and he had a history of involvement in kidnappings. This evidence was enough to detain him for questioning and to seize his vehicle for further DNA testing. During the interview, the suspect, Antolin, showed arrogance and was dismissive of the questions. He claimed that on the day Sierra vanished, he had gone fishing and didn't know who she was. He was confident that the investigators wouldn't find any evidence against him. However, before the interview ended, Antolin made a strange revelation. He admitted to having a habit of strangling a snake while driving and then throwing the tissue out the window. He also claimed to have thrown out a used tissue in the exact spot where Sierra's bag was found on the morning she went missing. We already had a 1 in a million chance with the rain on Sierra's phone, and the police didn't believe Antolin's implausible explanation either. On May 21, 2012, Antolin Garcia Torres was formally detained in connection with Sierra Lamar's disappearance outside his workplace in a Safeway parking lot. This was the result of several distinct links between Sierra and Antoline's vehicle. A DNA test found her DNA on the interior door handle of the car's rear door. Additionally, fibers from the car seats matched those found on Sierra's clothing, and a piece of rope inside the car contained a strand of her hair. This proved beyond a doubt that she had been in his car at some point. However, even after his arrest, there was a significant issue. Despite the apparent evidence, Sierra's body had yet to be found. Could they accuse Antoline of first-degree murder without a body or verified death? In reality, Santa Clara County District Attorney Jeff Rosen announced on May 19, 2014, that he would seek the death penalty against Antoline. Although Antoline had previously pleaded not guilty to killing Sierra, the overwhelming evidence pointed to his guilt. Antoline's trial began on January 30, 2017, after being delayed. The trial was prolonged and stressful for all parties involved, with the prosecution and defense presenting lengthy arguments over 13 weeks of testimony. Antoline's defense team argued that his exposure to pesticides from surrounding fields during his childhood may have impaired his cognitive abilities. They claimed that this exposure was not his fault and, as a result, he should not be eligible for the death penalty. The defense argued that Antoline faced a unique disadvantage due to circumstances beyond his control. In a final attempt, Antoline's defense team requested a new trial, questioning the chief investigator's reliability and honesty, and alleging that he had tampered with evidence in the past. However, this attempt was denied. The jury convicted Antoline Garcia Torres of Sierra Lamar's first-degree murder on May 9, 2017. The evidence was so overwhelming against Antoline that he was unable to escape responsibility for his acts, even though Sierra's body has never been located. Outside of the evidence offered, Antoline was formally given a life sentence without the chance of parole after being spared the death penalty. Since his sentencing, Antoline has stayed largely silent, and despite receiving hundreds of letters from news organizations and total strangers, only one letter has been answered. Antoline wrote, "I hold fast to my innocence, and I'm not going to talk about the matter." It's puzzling why Annalyn continues to claim innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against him. The presence of his DNA on Sierra's belongings, her DNA in his car, his past crimes, and a detailed timeline all clearly indicate his involvement in Sierra's disappearance. The search for Sierra Lamar is believed by some organizers to be the longest continuous search for a missing person in U.S. history. It spanned 3 years, with over 1,100 searches conducted within a 15-mile radius, totaling 50,000 man-hours of effort. Volunteers braved extreme weather conditions, from scorching summers to cold winters, in their quest for any information about Sierra. Despite the passing of time, many volunteers continue to search for her, driven by the desire to bring closure to her family, even though they acknowledge the likelihood of her being deceased. Currently, the whereabouts of Sierra's body remain unknown, but the hope is that one day, the Lamar family will find the closure they seek. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelly Cochran. Christopher Reagan grew up in Detroit, Michigan, where he received his education. At 20, he decided to serve his country and join the military. He was stationed at a base near Marquette, where he met Terry, a young teacher from Iron River. They became friends, bonding over their shared values and interests. Their friendship grew into a close relationship, but Christopher's military service didn't allow for a romantic relationship. When he left the military, he moved to Traverse City, but the distance didn't weaken their bond. In 2012, Christopher proposed a long-distance romantic relationship, and Terry agreed. They shared many common interests, including a love of nature and a desire for a peaceful lifestyle. They decided to live together in Iron River, where Christopher found a job at a factory. However, after 2 years, their passion faded and they parted ways amicably. Christopher moved out and began looking for a new place to live. He found a job in Asheville, North Carolina, and started a new chapter in his life. On October 14th, he told Terry he had taken the day off and suggested they meet up the next day for a walk. However, he failed to contact her the next day, and Terry became worried. After trying to reach him for several days, Terry filed a police report about Christopher's disappearance. The police reassured her that people sometimes disappear and then return, but Terry was concerned. At the police station, Terry told investigators that Christopher had recently received a job offer in North Carolina and might have started a new life, cutting ties with his past. However, to avoid speculation, a detailed investigation was launched. The police identified the company where Christopher had started working and contacted an employee, but surprisingly, no information about Christopher could be obtained, as he hadn't shown up to work in 10 days. Search efforts were then focused on the local woods, where Christopher often took solo trips with specially trained dogs deployed to aid in the search. Unfortunately, no trace of him was found. Terry suggested searching Christopher's former apartment to rule out any accidents or potential clues to his whereabouts. Upon entering the apartment, detectives found it in disarray, with items scattered across the floor and open closets. Although it initially seemed like Christopher was simply a messy person, Terry knew him to be more organized. The detectives began to suspect that the disarray might be related to a crime. After inspecting the apartment, they decided to expand the search area. They eventually found Christopher's car outside the city limits, about 8 miles from Iron River. Inside the car, they found ordinary clothes and a piece of yellow paper with a route written on it. The route had no specific address, but detailed notes described the path, including turning at a bus stop or driving past a gas station. Terry explained that Christopher, despite living in Iron River, wasn't familiar with the street names, so he wrote down directions in this way. The detectives followed the route, which led them to a house in a neighboring town. Upon knocking on the door, they met Jason Cochran, an overweight man, and his wife Kelly. The officers informed the couple that they were investigating Christopher's disappearance and found a piece of paper with their address in his abandoned car. Kelly revealed that she worked with Christopher at the same plant, and they were friends. Although Kelly hadn't been in contact with Christopher recently, she had tried to reach him via text messages in mid-October. She assumed he had started his new job in North Carolina and didn't respond. Kelly also mentioned Christopher's health issues, which might have led him to start anew. The investigators were puzzled by the route leading to the Cochran home and why it was in Christopher's car. Despite the lack of answers, the couple cooperated with the investigation. After further questioning, the detectives left the Cochran home and proceeded to interview Christopher's co-workers at the factory. There, they discovered that Christopher was having an affair with Kelly Cochran, which had been rumored for months. The investigation into Christopher's disappearance sparked a new lead when Kelly Cochran made a surprising statement. Investigators decided to re-question Kelly and her husband Jason to get to the bottom of their relationship. Kelly eventually admitted to having an affair with Christopher, but initially withheld the information because of her husband's presence. Kelly claimed that she and Jason had an open relationship and Jason was okay with her infidelity. However, Christopher's co-workers disputed this, saying that Jason did not approve of the affair and that the Cochran family did not have an open relationship. When Jason was questioned, he revealed that he was strongly opposed to his wife's infidelity, making him a suspect. However, the lack of concrete evidence meant that the investigators couldn't conclude that he was involved in Christopher's disappearance. Kelly and Jason were released from the police station, and the investigation continued for 5 months without a breakthrough. A new investigator, Detective Jeremy Ogden, took over the case and began a thorough analysis of the Cochran family's history. Kelly and Jason had met in high school and started living together after graduation. Despite their personality differences, they got married and started a swimming pool maintenance business. Jason handled most of the work, but the physical demands took a toll on his health, leaving him with back problems. When Jason's condition worsened, Kelly took over the business. During this time, Kelly sought ways to help her husband recover, including finding a medicinal plant that could help alleviate his back pain. However, the plant was banned in their state, so they moved to Michigan in 2014 to access it. In Michigan, Kelly and Jason got jobs at the same plant where Christopher worked. Kelly and Christopher became close friends, which was important to him given his relationship troubles with Terry. The prosecutors eventually obtained a search warrant for the Cochrans' home, but the search yielded no evidence linking them to Christopher's disappearance. The only significant find was a book written by Jason under a pseudonym inspired by video games. The title of the book caught their attention, but its content was disturbing. The book described violent murder scenes targeting everyone who had ever wronged Jason. The detectives read it thoroughly and found a character that matched Christopher's profile exactly. This strengthened their suspicions about Jason, making them wonder if he wasn't making up the crimes, but instead drawing inspiration from real events he had committed. 3 weeks later, the police decided to conduct another search of the Cochran house, hoping to find evidence they might have missed the first time. However, when they arrived, they found the house empty and the family had moved to Indiana. This made the investigators anxious, as they feared they might not find the crucial evidence they had been searching for months, particularly DNA samples from the suspects. Michigan police contacted their Indiana counterparts to help collect DNA samples from the Cochrans. The Indiana police officers went to the Cochrans' new home, and Jason and Kelly did not object to the procedure, as there was no concrete evidence linking them to the murder. Time passed, and on February 22, 2016, Kelly called the police, frantic, saying her husband Jason was unresponsive. When the rescue team arrived, they found Kelly in a panic, trying to obstruct the doctors. Jason was sitting in a chair, his face severely burned as if from extreme overheating. The doctors confirmed his death, and the body was sent for forensic examination. During the search of the Cochrans' new home, an officer discovered a syringe needle near the bed. The forensic report revealed that Jason's death was not due to drug abuse, as initially suspected, but rather strangulation, confirmed by bruises on his neck and face. This discovery turned Jason, the prime suspect in Christopher's kidnapping, into a victim himself. The investigation became even more complex, and forensic experts shifted their focus to Kelly Cochran, who now became the prime suspect in both Christopher's disappearance and her husband's murder. Kelly was invited to the police station to testify in Jason's murder case. During the interrogation, the investigators asked her directly if she had administered excessive doses of illegal drugs to her husband or was involved in his death. However, despite the pressure, Kelly did not confess to either crime. Months later, the investigators still lacked concrete evidence to prove Kelly's guilt and justify an arrest. During the investigation, Detective Jeremy Ogden met Walter Hammerman, a close friend of Jason's, who insisted that illegal drugs could not have caused Jason's death, as he knew his friend well and would have been informed about any changes in his life. Jason had been using medicinal herbs to alleviate his chronic back pain. However, his friend Walter noticed a significant change in his behavior around March last year. Jason confided in Walter about the mounting pressure from the Iron River police, who suspected him and his wife Kelly of involvement in a man's disappearance. The ordeal had taken a toll on Jason, leaving him depressed and even suicidal, which required intensive treatment. Walter observed that Kelly had begun to exert more control over Jason's life, making him increasingly anxious and withdrawn. Jason would avoid social gatherings when Kelly was around, and their video game sessions had become a thing of the past. These observations proved crucial in the investigation, helping detectives understand the dynamics within the Cochran family. After the medical examiner determined that Jason's death was by strangulation, Detective Ogden devised a plan to lure Kelly into a trap. The plan involved using Walter as bait to prompt Kelly into making a mistake. Walter agreed to play along, and on March 12, 2016, he called Kelly under police surveillance. He pretended that Jason had given him a letter containing vital information, which Kelly was supposed to send to the police if anything happened to Jason. However, Kelly suddenly told Walter to drop the idea, catching both him and the police off guard. Despite this, detectives still lacked concrete evidence, and Kelly continued to deny her involvement during subsequent interrogations. On April 26, 2016, Kelly seemingly evaded the authorities, prompting a federal manhunt. Walter, who had cooperated with the police, was shocked and fearful that Kelly might evade justice and potentially target him. The police eventually tracked Kelly's phone to the West Coast, and on April 28th, they arrested her at her cousin's home in Wingo, Kentucky. Once in custody, Kelly confessed to her relationship with Christopher Reagan, revealing that she had wanted to leave her husband and start a new life with him. However, when Jason discovered her infidelity, their situation escalated, and Kelly was bound by a pact they had made on their wedding night, obliging her to kill her lover if her cheating was exposed. Kelly Cochran claimed she never intended to follow through on an agreement she made with her husband, Jason, but he was determined to see it through. The agreement was a threat to kill Christopher Reagan, Kelly's lover, if she didn't end the affair. Kelly didn't want to do it, but she ultimately helped Jason commit the crime. On October 14, 2015, Christopher arrived at Kelly's house while her husband was away. Kelly offered him dinner and intimacy, and they went upstairs to the bedroom. However, Jason suddenly appeared, panicked and holding a rifle. Without hesitation, he shot Christopher in the head, killing him instantly. Under Jason's direction, Kelly helped dismember Christopher's body using a hacksaw, detaching his limbs and head from his torso. They placed the remains in trash bags and dumped them in the woods near Crystal Falls. They also drove Christopher's car away from the house to avoid suspicion and thoroughly cleaned the house to remove evidence of the crime. Kelly later confessed to her role in the crime, saying she wanted revenge against Jason for forcing her to end her affair with Christopher. She was deeply in love with Christopher and felt Jason had deprived her of happiness. Months later, on February 22, 2016, Kelly killed Jason by suffocating him after giving him a lethal dose of medication. She then helped the police find Christopher's remains, which were buried in the woods near Crystal Falls. A team of investigators and a canine unit searched the area and eventually found a human skull with a bullet hole, confirming it was Christopher's severed head. A .22 caliber bullet, a broken gun, and glasses likely belonging to Reagan were found at the scene. Dental records were used to identify the victim's remains, finally solving the 2-year-old missing person case. In April 2016, Kelly Cochran was formally charged with the murders of Christopher Reagan and Jason Cochran. On February 13, 2017, the 34-year-old was arraigned in Michigan State Court. The prosecutor argued that Kelly was the mastermind behind both crimes and that her motive was rage and jealousy. Christopher viewed their relationship as casual, but Kelly genuinely loved him and wanted a future together. When Christopher refused to commit, Kelly decided to kill him, making up a story about a pact with her husband. The prosecution had strong evidence, including Kelly's confession in court. However, Kelly claimed she was being abused by her jealous husband, who had planned and committed the crime. She said he hid in the basement, caught the lovers off guard, and then shot Christopher in a rage. Kelly claimed Jason suggested dismembering the body and coerced her into helping by threatening to kill her. This version raised doubts about Kelly's guilt, but the jury still found her guilty of premeditated murder. Kelly was sentenced to life without parole. Jason Cochran's case was settled with a plea agreement, and Kelly received an additional 65 years in prison. Kelly was sent to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Michigan, where she is serving her sentence and regrets that her personal life didn't work out. In a phone interview, Kelly said, "I tried to do what I thought was right. I got married. She also shared, it was good in the beginning, but in the end, all my efforts were in vain. All I did was work while my husband played computer games. In prison, Kelly continues to reveal details of her crimes, claiming she and Jason committed more crimes and that Christopher was just one of their many victims. However, Kelly's claims are difficult to verify, and there is no concrete evidence to support them. Her brother has also heard similar claims, but there is no evidence to back them up. Detective Jeremy Ogden is investigating the details, hoping to find evidence of other possible crimes committed by Kelly and Jason Cochran. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sandra Cantu. Sandra Cantu was born on March 8, 2001, in Tracy, San Joaquin County. She grew up in Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park in Tracy, California, living with her mother, grandparents, and 3 older siblings. Although her parents, Maria and Daniel, were separated, the children remained close to their father through regular phone calls. Sandra was a friendly and outgoing child who made friends easily and was well liked by both kids and adults in the neighborhood. She loved playing outside with her friends. On March 27, 2009, Sandra returned home from school around 2 p.m. and was excited to share her day with her family. Later that afternoon, she went out to play with her friends in the neighborhood, as she usually did. Before leaving the house, Sandra changed into her favorite Hello Kitty top and black leggings and hugged her mother. When dinner time approached at 7 p.m., Sandra had not returned home, which made her mother, Maria, anxious. Maria tried calling some of Sandra's friends to see if she was with them, but no one had seen her. As her worries grew, Maria drove around the neighborhood, asking people if they had seen Sandra, but no one had seen her for hours. At 7:53 p.m., Maria made an urgent call to 911 for help. When Maria reported her daughter Sandra missing, the Tracy Police Department responded promptly to the mobile home park. They initiated a thorough search of the neighborhood, questioning Maria about Sandra's clothing at the time of her disappearance. Maria recalled that Sandra was last seen wearing a pink Hello Kitty shirt, black leggings, and Hannah Montana flip-flops. The police then conducted a door-to-door inquiry, speaking with neighbors to determine if anyone had seen Sandra or observed anything unusual in the area. They also displayed Sandra's picture to all residents. The officers demonstrated a high level of commitment to finding Sandra and identifying potential leads, evident in their meticulous questioning of neighbors and dissemination of Sandra's images in the hope of ensuring her safe return. On March 27th, the police were unable to find any trace of Sandra. The following day, March 28th, they sought help from the FBI, launching a massive search operation. This effort involved cadaver dogs, helicopters, and a large team of volunteers dedicated to finding the missing 8-year-old girl. Detectives also showed Sandra's photos to everyone in the area, hoping for any information about her whereabouts. Unfortunately, no one had any leads. The search for Sandra was a traumatic experience for the Tracy community. Dozens of local volunteers joined 230 professional search and rescue personnel from 16 different agencies to thoroughly search the town for any signs of her. The U.S. Coast Guard further assisted the aerial search over Tracy by deploying a C-13 military plane equipped with state-of-the-art cameras. Sandra's disappearance quickly gained widespread media attention. Authorities initially offered a $2,000 reward for information that could help locate her or uncover clues about her disappearance. As her case received significant media coverage, the reward amount was increased to $30,000. The search for Sandra, an 8-year-old Tracy girl, continues this morning. According to investigators, Sandra Cantu went missing after walking away from her home at the Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park in Tracy. One of the estimated 300 volunteers who joined the search over the weekend expressed their hope that Sandra would be found and returned to her family and friends. Sandra is a Hispanic girl, 4 feet tall, and weighs 45 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. Surveillance footage shows Sandra leaving the mobile home park around 4 p.m. and returning, but she was last seen walking away again. The key question is, where did she go that last time, and where is she now? The investigation is ongoing, and police urge anyone with information to contact Tracy authorities. Everyone searched for her, but no signs of her were found. Later, detectives examined the security camera footage installed by Sandra's grandfather. The recording showed Sandra leaving her house, heading to the park to play. When she returned, she seemed happy, skipping back home at 4 p.m. But instead of going inside, she suddenly turned and walked down the street towards one of the exits. The footage stopped at this point, leaving her next steps a mystery. This unexpected behavior was concerning, as Sandra usually followed safety rules about not leaving with strangers. The police suspected that someone or something familiar to her might have caught her attention. The investigators' initial suspect was Sandra's father, Daniel, due to his prolonged absence from her life, which was revealed during the police investigation. Additionally, they discovered that Daniel and Maria were engaged in a financial dispute related to custody issues. However, Maria assured the detective that despite their marital problems, Daniel would never be involved in Sandra's disappearance. According to Maria, Sandra had a strong bond with her father, and they got along well. The media later interviewed Daniel about his missing child. When asked for a statement, Daniel recounted receiving a call from his sister on Friday, informing him that Sandra was missing. He rushed to the scene and waited for a day before returning to work. Daniel stressed that the purpose of the interview was to shift the attention away from himself and onto the potential perpetrator, if there was one. He urged the detective to do their job to the best of their ability, emphasizing the need to focus on finding the real person behind Sandra's disappearance. A week after Sandra Cantu's disappearance, the 8-year-old girl's whereabouts remained unknown. In Tracy, authorities were pursuing hundreds of leads and increasing the reward for information about her. Investigators were combing through trash at the local landfill, searching nearby rivers, and looking into suspicious individuals, including residents of the mobile park and those seen in the area on March 27th. These individuals included an unknown ice cream vendor who had interacted with children in the neighborhood that day, and Frank Waller, a neighbor of the Cantu family who was rumored to be a pedophile. Frank had previously admitted to kissing Sandra on the lips 2 years earlier, claiming it was a friendly gesture. Despite the disturbing nature of his admission, the authorities ultimately cleared him as a suspect, though they made it clear they would keep a close eye on him. Meanwhile, the search for the real perpetrator continued, and the community rallied around Maria, showing her support and love during this tough period. At 8:30 p.m., neighbor Melissa discovered a disturbing handwritten note near a mailbox just miles from Sandra's family. It read, "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase thrown in water on Boucher Road and Whitehall Road." The note had obvious spelling mistakes, sparking questions. Was it real or meant to confuse the investigation? Melissa told FBI agents she didn't notice anyone or anything unusual when she found the note. She let them search her car, where they found a post-it note in the glove box with scribbled out words. The note was sent to experts for analysis. Following this discovery, they chose to release Melissa and shift their attention back to analyzing the original note found near the mailbox. Weeks went by, but authorities could not find any traces of Sandra. After 10 long days of searching for Sandra, her case took a shocking turn. The police chief told us that the person or persons responsible for the death of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu would be brought to justice. Sandra's death has devastated the community. Jose Luis Franco, a farm worker, found a locked black suitcase while draining a pond. The weight of the case sparked dread, and their fears were realized. Inside, Sandra's lifeless body was curled up, dressed in black leggings and a Hello Kitty shirt, with many cuts and wounds. A torn cloth was tied around her head, covered in blood, evoking shock and sorrow. Sandra's body was sent to undergo an autopsy to gather more information about her death. The results of the autopsy were devastating and added to the shock and horror surrounding her death. The autopsy revealed disturbing details. Sandra had been brutally assaulted, but there was no sign of any biological fluids. The injuries suggested that an unknown object had been used, and the cause of her death was asphyxiation. Furthermore, the coroner found a large amount of alprazolam in her system, indicating that she had been drugged. The official cause of death was recorded as homicide by asphyxiation. Sadly, it was discovered that she was murdered just hours after she was last seen on surveillance footage, a terrifying fact that sent shockwaves through the community. The description of the neighbor matched a woman named Melissa Huck. Investigators checked the CCTV camera at Sandra's house and confirmed that Melissa owned the same type of car. The footage showed Melissa getting into her SUV from a parking spot directly across the street from her house around 3:30 p.m. She drove towards her residence, which was located to the left of Sandra's house. Later, Melissa visited her grandparents' church before being seen by a resident near the pond at approximately 5:30 p.m. This timeline was surprising, as it established that Melissa was in the area around the time Sandra disappeared. The police had identified a prime suspect in the case, Melissa. They strongly believed she was the perpetrator and wanted to question her. However, when they approached her, they discovered that she had attempted to take her own life by swallowing razor blades. As a result, Melissa was hospitalized, and the police were forced to wait until she recovered before they could interrogate her. Once she was well enough, Melissa claimed to have no knowledge of the events surrounding the case and maintained that her only involvement was bringing the note to their attention. She told the officers that at 4 p.m. on the day Sandra was last seen, she had been at her church, decorating her classroom, and had not seen anything unusual in the area. The police unsurprisingly asked Melissa to confirm her alibi, which her phone records ultimately supported as crucial evidence. It turned out that Melissa had earlier called the police herself to report the theft of her suitcase from her driveway. She explained that after learning about Sandra's disappearance, she had even sent Maria a text message telling the police she had been robbed around 4 p.m., although she wasn't sure if that detail was significant. The stolen suitcase proved to be a crucial piece of evidence in the investigation. The black Eddie Bauer suitcase containing Sandra was identical to the one Melissa had reported stolen, which added to its significance. The note Melissa found not only mentioned a suitcase, but specifically referred to a stolen one. Although the authorities had gathered substantial evidence implicating Melissa, they sought additional information. They decided to wiretap her phone and waited patiently for her release from the hospital. 2 days later, when Melissa was discharged from the hospital, the police were stunned to discover that she had called the Canto family. During their conversation, Melissa invited one of Sandra's siblings to her home to play with her supposedly 5-year-old daughter. Responding to her residence immediately, the officers found no children inside, suggesting that Melissa might have been planning to lure another young victim into her house. A second neighbor has come forward with a disturbing revelation. Just before Sandra's disappearance, Melissa had taken a 7-year-old girl from the neighborhood to the park without her parents' permission. When the child returned, she was disoriented, slurred her speech, and had trouble walking. Her parents took her to the hospital, where tests revealed she had been drugged with benzodiazepines, the same drug found in Sandra's body. Although Melissa denied giving the girl drugs, the incident raised suspicions. As the investigation continued, the police grew increasingly suspicious of Melissa. They were shocked to learn about the drugged child. Soon after, they obtained a warrant to search Melissa's trailer and her grandparents' church. During the trailer search, they found a notebook with handwriting that exactly matched the note Melissa had claimed to have found on the ground. This discovery provided a crucial link between Melissa and the note, leaving the police stunned. Later, experts analyzing the post-it note found in Melissa's car's glove box made a stunning revelation. The note featured cryptic words, including Bache Road, Whitehall Road, and water, which added a mysterious layer to the ongoing investigation. Furthermore, they discovered alprazolam in Melissa's purse, a drug prescribed to her, which matched the substance found in Sandra's body. During the 2009 search of Clover Road Baptist Church, a blood-stained rolling pin was found with Sandra's DNA. A draw cord was missing from a window blind, and the cord used on the Eddie Bow suitcase matched the remaining church blinds. Melissa Huckabee, a 28-year-old Sunday school teacher, was arrested on April 10, 2009. Initially, she denied involvement, but later confessed, stating Sandra's death was an accident. She persuaded Sandra to enter a suitcase for a game with her daughter, and later found her lifeless body. Melissa claimed that she had played a game of hide-and-seek with Sandra, suggesting that Sandra hide in a suitcase and then jump out to surprise her own daughter and sister. Sandra allegedly agreed to the plan and zipped herself inside the suitcase. Melissa then said that she had forgotten Sandra was inside and didn't remember until she arrived at a church where she opened the case to find Sandra unresponsive. In a panic, Melissa attempted to perform CPR and used a small wet towel to cool Sandra's forehead, but admitted she didn't know how to handle the situation. Later, Melissa got rid of the suitcase containing Sandra's body in a nearby pond. However, the investigators found that Melissa was not telling the truth when they looked into her personal life and discovered a history of criminal activity, depression, and other mental health issues. Melissa's legal history was well documented, and court records revealed that she pleaded no contest to felony second-degree commercial burglary and misdemeanor property theft charges on January 9th. A criminal complaint highlighted her prior convictions, including a 2006 property theft conviction that resulted in jail time in Los Angeles County. In November 2008, she was accused of attempting to steal from a store while on probation in San Juan County and had a scheduled court date. Melissa had also filed for bankruptcy in 2003, citing credit card debt and medical expenses. Melissa's father said she struggled with depression and finding her path after college. Her ex-husband confirmed her depression and self-image issues, but described her as carefree. They married in 2003, separated in 2004, and divorced in 2005, with Melissa getting full custody of their 5-year-old daughter. John Huckabee was shocked when he learned that his ex-wife Melissa was involved in the murder of a young girl. He couldn't believe it, saying it's not something you want to think anyone is capable of, especially someone you know and who is the mother of your child. After they separated, Melissa moved to Southern California to live with her parents, which made it difficult for John to see his daughter. During a past custody battle, Melissa had made accusations against John, claiming he was guilty of alcohol abuse and domestic violence, which he strongly denied. John, who had lost touch with Melissa for over 3 years, was now seeking custody of their daughter. He had started a new family, remarrying and having 2 more children. However, the idea of Melissa being involved in the rape and murder of a child seemed impossible to comprehend. At trial, Melissa Huckabee showed emotion when the judge announced her crimes. Throughout, prosecutor Thomas Testa argued Melissa had planned Sandra's murder. He showed surveillance footage of Sandra heading to Melissa's house. Testa claimed Melissa drugged Sandra with juice at a church, then waited for her to pass out before attacking and suffocating her. The prosecutor, Thomas Testa, initially intended to push for the death penalty in the case against Melissa Huckabee because she had not admitted to the horrific crimes. But a turning point came during the trial when Melissa suddenly decided to plead guilty, accepting full responsibility for what she had done. During the trial, Judge Linda Loftus of San Juan County Superior Court questioned Melissa Huckabee to ensure she understood the consequences of pleading guilty. Judge Loftus asked Melissa if she had discussed the matter with her lawyers and if she was certain about giving up her right to a jury trial. Melissa affirmed that she had and reiterated her decision to plead guilty. After completing her questioning, Prosecutor Thomas Testa expressed concerns about Melissa's mental health. He highlighted her unusual behavior in prison, including a recent incident where she attempted to harm herself, which raised questions about her ability to make rational decisions. Testa noted that Melissa appeared coherent and rational in court, but he was worried about her mental state in the long run. Melissa Huckabee's guilty plea was a pivotal moment in the case. By admitting her guilt, she brought some closure to the Cantu family, saving them from a long and painful trial. This significant development altered the course of the court proceedings and paved the way for what would happen next in Sandra's case. Melissa's guilty plea simplified the process and provided the Cantu family with some comfort after all they had endured since Sandra's tragic death. On June 14, 2010, Melissa Huckabee received a life sentence without parole for the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Sandra Cantu. The motivations behind Sandra's tragic death remain unclear. Prosecutors believed Melissa planned the crime to harm Sandra intentionally. Despite this, Melissa never disclosed her reasons, leaving investigators baffled. However, documents revealed a troubled individual with a history of depression, self-harm, and a difficult past. Melissa is now serving her life sentence at Sand County Jail, burdened by the gravity of her actions. Her imprisonment serves as a reminder that severe crimes have severe consequences. For the Cantu family, the pain of losing Sandra will never fully subside, but they find comfort in knowing justice has been served. The trial and conviction brought a sense of closure, ensuring Sandra's tragic death did not go unpunished. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lauren Heike. Life can be unpredictable, filled with both joyous moments and heart-wrenching tragedies. The story of Lauren Heike, 29-year-old from Phoenix, Arizona, serves as a poignant reminder of how fragile our existence can be and how quickly everything can change. Lauren, a beautiful soul with captivating green eyes, had an unwavering faith in the goodness of others. Little did she know that her trust and openness would ultimately lead to her untimely demise. Lauren Heike was born on November 20, 1993, in Seattle, Washington, into a well-off family. Her father, Jeff, owned a plumbing manufacturing business, and her mother, Lana, worked in real estate. She was very close to her older brother, Ryan. Lauren received her secondary education at Central Kitsap High School in Silverdale, Washington. After graduation, she moved to Phoenix and enrolled at the Gary Manuel Leda Institute, where she studied to become a cosmetologist and skincare specialist. Lauren always took great care of herself and had a good understanding of cosmetics, so her education helped her develop her natural inclinations. She began her career at the age of 18 and built a successful path. Initially, she worked as a customer support representative for 5 years, starting in 2015. Lauren then became a leading manager at the renowned cosmetics company Benefit, before working as a cosmetologist at a beauty salon for 9 months in October 2020. She later got a job as a manager at the Center for Aesthetic Medicine. She also planned to follow in her mother's footsteps and try her hand in the real estate field. At the time of the tragedy, Lauren was working full-time as an instructor at a golf club. She was never afraid of difficulties, was responsible, and easily found common ground with people. She was actively developing in the beauty industry, sports, and real estate. Lauren carefully monitored her physical fitness, regularly engaging in fitness activities, and generally led a healthy, active lifestyle. She had many friends and a supportive family. In addition to working in sports and meeting with friends, she adored traveling and hiking. It was because of the presence of picturesque trails that she loved Phoenix so much. Lauren often walked alone, listening to music and enjoying the fresh air, silence, and tranquility of nature. Her favorite route was a path in the northern part of the city, not far from her apartment, where there was almost never anyone around. Understandably, her parents were very concerned about her solitary walks in deserted places, but Lauren herself was convinced that nothing bad could happen to her. According to her family, Lauren had a kind of routine. She would wake up, drink coffee, chat with loved ones and friends, and then go for a walk. She did this every day because she believed that this way she would start the new day with positivity. Unfortunately, she did not realize that her trusting nature and carefree attitude could cause a fatal role. On April 28, 2023, Lauren's morning began as usual. She drank coffee, talked with family and friends on the phone, and went for her usual walk in the northern district of Phoenix, not far from her own apartment. The route passed through a picturesque trail in a calm, quiet, sparsely populated area, and took 15 to 30 minutes one way. The girl left the house at approximately 10:30 a.m. The last time surveillance cameras recorded her was at 10:52, when Lauren was calmly walking along the trail in the park. She was wearing a pink sports top, black leggings, and sneakers. She only had her phone and keys with her. No one saw her again. Lauren was supposed to show up for work at 11:30, but did not come and did not warn about her delay or absence. This was uncharacteristic for a very responsible girl. Colleagues started calling her, but to no avail. Lauren's phone was turned off. Worried friends began sending messages on social networks and calling each other, hoping that someone knew where Lauren was. But no one could say anything because no one had seen her after she left the house in the morning. Around 1 p.m., Lauren's parents, unable to reach her, arrived at her apartment hoping their daughter was unwell and had not gone to work. However, Lauren was not home, though her belongings were undisturbed and the doors locked. No signs of a break-in or struggle were evident. It appeared she had gone for a walk and not returned. Concerned, her family promptly contacted the police to report her missing. Law enforcement responded swiftly, but initial searches proved futile. The sunny day of April 28th, typical for the area, saw few visitors at the park where Lauren was last seen walking. Had someone been present during the attack, perhaps the tragedy could have been averted, but fate dictated otherwise. As hours passed with no word from Lauren, anxiety mounted among her loved ones. Despite extensive searches of the park and surrounding areas, no clues surfaced. Hoping she had simply wandered off or was delayed, family and friends reached out in vain. The next morning, April 29th, around 11 a.m., the worst fears were realized when a passerby discovered Lauren's body. The woman promptly contacted the authorities, who found Lauren's body, riddled with stab wounds, a short distance from the trail in the undergrowth. She lay face up, arms outstretched, clothes torn, blood everywhere. Forensic experts quickly began their investigation. The medical examiner later determined her death on April 28th around 11 a.m. was due to severe blood loss from 15 deep knife wounds, likely inflicted with a pocket knife. The fatal wound to her back suggested a prolonged attack, evidenced by wounds of varying depth and location on her body. Injuries on her hands indicated a struggle, with deep cuts on both sides as she tried to defend herself from the sharp knife. Despite her resistance, the assailant, aggressive and strong, overpowered her unexpectedly. Scratches on her back and torn clothing suggested a surprise attack from behind, knocking her down and repeatedly stabbing her. A footprint from a size 42 to 43 sneaker at the scene likely belonged to the attacker. Signs of an attempt to escape, crawl away, and hide were visible in the area, but unsuccessful. Traces of blood and remains of a struggle near a barbed wire fence showed her desperate efforts to evade the murderer. Her personal belongings, a phone, and house keys were found nearby. There were no wallet or other valuables on her, so the possibility of robbery was immediately dismissed. Lauren's phone was found to be broken. The last calls were made on the evening of April 27th. As no one had heard from her for over a day, forensic specialists conducted a thorough examination of the territory. They discovered an important detail a few meters from the crime scene. Among the branches lay a bloody pocket knife. Experts immediately suspected this to be the murder weapon. A detailed examination of the blade and handle revealed fingerprints and other DNA traces belonging to an unknown man. Hair and epithelium of the killer were also found at the crime scene. Lauren's body and all physical evidence were promptly sent for examination. Simultaneously, investigators reviewed surveillance camera footage. It was revealed that one of the cameras captured the moment Lauren entered the park at 10:52. She was walking alone, listening to music on her headphones. Nothing suspicious was noted. However, a minute later, the figure of a tall, thin man in dark clothes sprinted past the camera, trying to hide his face. Despite this, experts identified him as a young African-American man in a cap, matching the description of the individual found at the crime scene. Another camera positioned at the park's exit recorded the same man swiftly exiting around the corner at 10:59. He attempted to climb over the fence, but got snagged on his clothes, eventually jumping over and losing his cap. The suspect then disappeared in an unknown direction. These recordings provided the investigation with a crucial lead, offering a detailed description of the person to be located. It's notable that the unknown man's appearance in the park coincided with the time of Lauren's murder. The cameras captured the suspect immediately before and after the crime. A meticulous analysis of the footage showed that the suspect moved purposefully and quickly, appearing vigilant as if afraid of being detected. Secondly, he showed up in the park only 30 to 40 seconds after Lauren, clearly following her. Following the crime, he quickly ran away in the opposite direction from the park's entrance, climbing a fence to disappear rapidly. All of this supports the belief that the murder was planned in advance, indicating it may not have been his first crime. He acted swiftly and boldly, attempting to leave no trace. However, in the panic of the escape, he made some errors that led to him being captured partially on camera. The footage from the cameras was promptly shared with Lauren's relatives, but no one could identify him in the video. The shock and sorrow felt by everyone was palpable. Her relatives couldn't comprehend how someone could brutally take the life of their beloved, gentle girl. Lauren had no enemies, conflicts, valuables, or significant sums of money. Her lifestyle was not hazardous, dispelling notions of revenge or robbery. 1 week after the tragic event, the police held a press conference to share details about the evidence found. They asked the public for help in identifying the suspect. Lauren's father, with tears in his eyes, urged anyone with information to come forward. The family also offered a significant reward for any useful leads. The city was worthy Lauren's story, sparking a huge reaction. Social media was full of sharing information, search efforts, and volunteer work. At the same time, forensic investigations continued. DNA, fingerprints, and other biological evidence were carefully examined in the lab. Finally, experts struck gold. The suspect's genetic profile matched records in the police database. The system revealed the name, Zion William Teasley, a 22-year-old African-American with a history of criminality. Detectives swiftly delved into Zion's background, unearthing his challenging upbringing in a home marred by addiction and criminality since his youth. In 2020, he was convicted of a series of armed robberies. Zion spent almost a year in prison but was released early for good behavior. He was last arrested in January 2023 for a knife attack on a passerby. However, the victim then withdrew the statement, so Teasley got off with a suspended sentence. At the time of Lauren's murder, he was under police supervision and had to regularly check in at the precinct. The last such check took place on April 27th, the day before the tragedy in the park. With this new information, the detectives began to develop a plan to detain the suspect. They established round-the-clock surveillance on him and discovered that Zion was not working anywhere at that time, spending all his time at home and occasionally visiting some dubious individuals. Obtaining an arrest warrant, the capture group went to Zion Teasley's apartment. The door had to be broken down, but no one was inside. During the search, the police found a bucket of chlorine, gloves, and rags, indicating an attempt to destroy evidence, though he didn't have enough time for it. In Zion's room, they found a suitcase stuffed with clothes, a brand new passport in a different name, and bus tickets to Canada, suggesting a plan to flee the country. Investigators immediately suspected that Zion had found out about the search and was trying to evade justice. A large-scale special operation began with the focus on Zion Teasley being sent to all states. Border guards were alerted to apprehend the murder suspect. Patrols were deployed at railway stations, airports, and highways. Detectives traced the fugitive's phone calls and located him using signals from cell towers. Meanwhile, they also collected evidence, including witnesses who saw Zion Teasley following Lauren before her murder. A thorough investigation into Zion's history uncovered previous assaults on women, suggesting a history of violence. He was arrested for harassing a girl in a club. Prior to that, a girl he was dating wrote a statement accusing him of beating her. Although the case was closed due to lack of evidence, Zion was widely regarded as an extremely aggressive and unbalanced person who held contempt for women, considering them inferior. His social media posts were filled with derogatory language towards women, and there were also photos of knives resembling the murder weapon. Police suggested that Lauren might have been a random victim of Zion's violent tendencies. It was theorized that he spotted her on the street, stalked her, and then attacked her in a deserted place. Some speculated that he may have felt provoked by her attractiveness and apparent vulnerability, a common trigger for individuals with his mindset. Lauren's family, devastated by her senseless death, implored the public to eschew vigilante justice and allow the legal system to handle the case. After a 3-day search, Zion Teasley was apprehended in an abandoned garage on the city's outskirts. During his arrest, he resisted and injured a police officer. Subsequently, during questioning, he adamantly denied any involvement in the crime. However, when presented with surveillance footage from the park, he fell silent and requested legal representation. The prosecution swiftly charged Zion Teasley with intentional murder and kidnapping, citing substantial evidence such as video recordings, Lauren's belongings found in the garage, a knife, and DNA and fingerprints found at the crime scene. As a result, the court ordered that he be held in custody without the option for bail. The trial of Zion Teasley began on June 5, 2023, a highly publicized case in the state's history, capturing the attention of the entire nation. Journalists, activists, and concerned citizens gathered outside the courthouse, eager to observe the accused individual. Accompanied by tight security, Zion entered the courtroom in handcuffs, wearing an orange prison outfit, seemingly indifferent. Lauren's family openly displayed their emotions. Her mother wept continuously, while her father glared angrily at the defendant. Friends of the victim, holding her pictures, also attended the proceedings. The prosecutor argued that Zion Teasley was a dangerous and calculated killer who posed a significant danger to society. He emphasized the audacious nature of the crime and the strong evidence against the defendant, portraying Zion as a misogynistic psychopath who took pleasure in causing harm to women. In contrast, Zion's lawyer sought to prove his client's innocence, questioning the presented evidence and suggesting the involvement of another individual in Lauren's death. The defense attorney advised the jury to make their decision based on facts rather than emotions or public opinion, highlighting Zion's difficult upbringing and the harsh treatment he endured in his family. Zion William Teasley currently faces charges of first-degree murder. In December 2023, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office pushed for the death penalty, the harshest punishment allowed by Arizona state law for such a serious crime. The Phoenix Police Department concluded their investigation into the case, with the suspect now awaiting trial. There is no information that would indicate that the attack on Lauren Ha was anything other than a random choice of a victim by the perpetrator. Zion Teasley himself does not admit his guilt in committing this brutal murder. He continues to be held in custody without the right to post bail. The trial of the accused is scheduled for October 2025. It is expected that this will be one of the most resonant trials in the history of the state of Arizona. The tragic death of Lauren Heike shook all of America and became a real shock for her family and friends. She, who loved life so much and believed in the goodness of people, became a victim of a cruel and senseless crime. This murder once again reminded society of the importance of public safety and timely response to alarming signals about the inadequate behavior of certain individuals. This story also showed how important the work of law enforcement agencies is, as they were able to promptly find and detain the suspect and gather the necessary evidence of his guilt. Ahead is the judicial review of this case, which should put the final point and determine the measure of responsibility of the murderer. Society hopes that justice will be fair and that the criminal will receive the most severe punishment. Most importantly, the memory of Lauren Heike should live in the hearts of all who knew and loved her. This girl will forever remain young, beautiful, kind, and sincere. Let her story be a warning to everyone. Value life, be careful, and do not be indifferent to those who are near. In a world where the boundaries between love and horror, between compassion and betrayal, become increasingly blurred, we are confronted with a story that captures global attention. This is the tale of Jenna Oakley, a young woman whose life has descended into a haunting nightmare, entwined with passions, revenge, and sinister secrets. Through the eyes of those who have grappled with the dichotomy of good and evil, faith and betrayal, we delve into a narrative that prompts contemplation about the very essence of the human soul and the values that guide our decisions. Despite efforts by Jenna's legal team to argue for her confinement in a juvenile facility, Judge Darren Peckler decreed that she should face the consequences of her actions in an adult prison. As the verdict was delivered, the judge condemned the cruelty and senselessness of the crime against Rhonda, Jenna's stepmother. While Jenna was convicted, her father, Philip Oakley, remained plagued by questions about his daughter's motivations. Dissatisfied with the sentencing, Philip believed Jenna deserved a harsher punishment, lamenting the fact that she would only serve 15 years, while he, her brother, and Rhonda's children would endure a lifetime of pain and loss. But who was Jenna Oakley, and what drove an ordinary girl to commit such a heinous act, becoming enmeshed in a tale of tragedy? Let us delve into the depths of her soul together, seeking to unravel the motives behind her actions and grasp the true essence of this enigmatic personality. Jenna's upbringing was marked by hardship and neglect. Left alone at home from a young age, her mother's inability to provide a stable life left Jenna and her brother David vulnerable. The departure of her older stepsister, who had served as their guardian, further compounded their struggles. The neglect they endured was so severe that intervention by Child Protective Services became necessary, ultimately leading to their removal from their mother's care. In April of 2016, Jenna and David made the pivotal decision to move in with their father and his wife, Rhonda, a woman of 52 years at the time. Rhonda, from the outset, embraced her role as a stepmother wholeheartedly, treating her husband's children as her own. Those close to Rhonda and her husband later recounted how she had longed to be a nurturing presence in her stepchildren's lives, welcoming them into her home with warmth and sincerity. Little did anyone suspect that this seemingly ordinary transition would culminate in a harrowing tragedy. Despite Jenna's academic achievements and the praise she received from her teachers, she grappled with inner turmoil. Her rebellious nature made it challenging for her to adhere to the rules imposed in her new household. However, the situation escalated further when Jenna's parents discovered her relationship with a 20-year-old man named Kenneth, a connection that had roots dating back to Jenna's childhood in Indiana. As Jenna navigated the complexities of her adolescence, one enigmatic figure loomed large in her life: Rhonda, her stepmother. While ostensibly a pillar of support and protection, Rhonda's influence on Jenna's life would ultimately be shrouded in darkness. Delving into Rhonda's story becomes essential to unraveling the mysteries of her personality and understanding the profound impact she had on Jenna's life. Rhonda Raines Oakley, born on March 5, 1964, in Kent, USA, Casey County, emerged into the world as the daughter of Howard Lee Raines and Mabel Walls Raines. Her journey through life saw her graduate from Casey County High School in 1982, embarking on a 3-decade-long career in a renowned company specializing in marketing, packaging, and printing services. Described by her peers as a beacon of kindness and joy, Rhonda's warmth endeared her to many. Prior to her encounter with Philip Oakley, Rhonda had traversed the trials of divorce and motherhood, already a mother of 4 from a previous marriage. Fate intervened when Rhonda and Philip crossed paths on the golf course, igniting a whirlwind romance that led them to tie the knot. Despite their shared affection, the stark age difference between Rhonda and Philip raised eyebrows, prompting familial objections. Concerned about Jenna's involvement with Kenneth, who was 5 years her senior, Philip and Rhonda embarked on a mission to quell their daughter's infatuation. Rules were imposed, including the confiscation of Jenna's electronic devices and stern demands for compliance. However, Jenna's defiance only intensified, her clandestine rendezvous with Kenneth fueling a growing animosity towards her parents. On the fateful afternoon of September 1, 2016, as the golden hues of dusk began to descend, a grim discovery unfolded within the Oakley household. David, Jenna's younger brother, returned home from school, unaware of the tragedy that awaited him. As he stepped through the threshold and into the familiar confines of their home, an eerie silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the distant barking of their family pets echoing from the basement below. Curiosity mingled with apprehension. David ventured into the basement, where the source of the canine distress awaited. What he encountered in that dimly lit space would haunt him forever. There, sprawled upon the cold concrete floor, lay Rhonda, his stepmother, her form unnaturally still, an aura of foreboding enveloping her motionless figure. Shock and panic gripped David's heart as he rushed outside, his frantic footsteps echoing through the quiet suburban streets. With trembling hands, he sought aid from their neighbors, his voice a desperate plea for help in the face of unspeakable horror. Emergency services descended upon the scene, their presence a beacon of hope in the darkness that had descended upon the Oakley household. Yet, despite their valiant efforts, Rhonda's fate had been sealed in bloodshed. The grim reality of her demise painted a chilling picture of brutality, her life extinguished by the cruel hand of violence. As investigators delved into the heart of the matter, the sinister truth began to unfurl like a macabre tapestry. What initially appeared as a botched robbery soon revealed itself to be a tangled web of deceit and betrayal. Amidst the chaos of the crime scene, the absence of Rhonda's car and the ominous discovery of a discarded cleaver hinted at a calculated act of malice, orchestrated with chilling precision. Upon Philip's return home, he was immediately met with the piercing scrutiny of detectives, their questions probing the depths of his shattered reality. With a heavy heart, he recounted the events of that fateful day. Each word a painful reminder of the chaos that had unfolded within the sanctity of their home. As he spoke, a gnawing sense of dread gripped him, tendrils of uncertainty weaving their way into his consciousness. The realization that his daughter, Jenna, had been conspicuously absent from the fabric of their lives on that tragic day only served to deepen the shadow of suspicion that loomed over their fractured existence. In the midst of his interrogation, Philip found himself grappling with the weight of unanswered questions, each more ominous than the last. Did Jenna's inexplicable absence herald a darker truth, a sinister plot veiled beneath layers of deceit? The very thought sent shivers down his spine, a stark reminder of the fragility of their fractured reality. With a heavy heart and trembling voice, Philip disclosed the tumultuous relationship between Jenna and Kenneth, a young man whose presence had cast a pall over their once tranquil home. He recounted his desperate attempts to intervene, to shield his daughter from the perils of forbidden love, each plea falling upon deaf ears. Yet, even amidst the chaos of his shattered existence, Philip clung to the fragile hope that his daughter's innocence remained untainted, that beneath the veneer of suspicion lay a truth yet to be revealed. And so, with bated breath and weary resolve, He entrusted the weight of his fears to the vigilant gaze of law enforcement, their pursuit of justice a beacon of hope amidst the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Evidence pieced together by investigators revealed a chilling sequence of events leading up to the tragic incident. At 3 a.m. on August 31st, the day preceding the harrowing event, Kenneth embarked on a journey from Indiana to Lexington, Kentucky, his destination set firmly on the Oakley residence. Surveillance footage from a Denver store manager corroborated this, capturing Jenna and Kenneth's presence on September 1st. The footage depicted them entering the establishment and subsequently departing, seemingly in the direction of a vehicle resembling Rhonda's stolen car. Jenna's demeanor in the footage was unsettlingly composed, devoid of any outward signs of duress. This revelation prompted investigators to pivot their focus away from the notion of a forcible abduction, instead entertaining the unsettling possibility of Jenna's direct involvement in her stepmother's demise. Subsequent searches of Jenna's personal effects unearthed a chilling narrative within the pages of her diary, a narrative dripping with venomous hatred and a chilling resolve. In its pages, Jenna's innermost thoughts and desires were laid bare, revealing a festering resentment toward her family and a steadfast devotion to Kenneth, despite her earlier assurances of compliance with her parents' wishes. With meticulous detail, Jenna outlined her sinister plan to obliterate her family unit, driven by an obsessive desire to preserve her forbidden love at any cost. Her father was slated as the first victim, the designated hour of his demise meticulously plotted between 4 and 5 a.m. Armed with a knife, Jenna intended to lure him to the basement before delivering the fatal blow. Rhonda, her stepmother, was next in line, her fate sealed within the confines of Jenna's twisted imagination. Between 6 and 8 a.m., Jenna planned to invade Rhonda's sanctuary, silencing her forever with the same instrument of death wielded against her father. David, Jenna's unsuspecting brother, occupied the final slot in her macabre symphony of destruction. In the somber confines of his own room, he would meet his untimely end, victim to the machinations of a sister consumed by darkness. As Philip grappled with the horrifying reality laid bare in Jenna's diary, the weight of his daughter's malevolence bore down upon him, shattering the fragile facade of familial harmony beyond repair. In Jenna's meticulously orchestrated plan, he found himself confronted with the unthinkable, the knowledge that his daughter was capable of unspeakable atrocities, her innocence forever lost to the abyss of her own twisted desires. At the onset of the investigation, a damning piece of evidence emerged, thrusting Jenna into the unforgiving glare of suspicion. Philip wasted no time in providing the authorities with Kenneth's contact details, a crucial step in the relentless pursuit of justice. With unwavering determination, law enforcement agencies swiftly tracked the fugitives to their hideout, culminating in a dramatic showdown on September 4th, just 3 days after the heinous crime had been perpetrated. In the quiet streets of Tucumcari, New Mexico, authorities closed in on their quarry, discovering Rhonda's stolen car parked ominously near the hotel where Jenna and Kenneth sought refuge. With precision and resolve, officers apprehended the pair, swiftly escorting them to separate vehicles, bound for a detention facility in New Mexico pending extradition. As the investigation intensified, authorities scoured the confines of the vehicle in search of the weapon wielded in Rhonda's brutal attack. Yet their efforts yielded nothing but frustration. Meanwhile, Kenneth, in a desperate bid to shield Jenna from the full weight of culpability, penned a chilling missive before attempting to end his own life. The ghastly tableau of his self-inflicted demise sent shockwaves through the detention center, leaving Kenneth teetering on the precipice of mortality. In the wake of this harrowing revelation, authorities made the conscious decision to shield Jenna from the grim reality unfolding within the confines of her co-conspirator's cell. With painstaking care, they orchestrated her return to Kentucky, their intent clear: to spare her the burden of knowledge until such time as she could offer her own testimony. For Jenna, shrouded in the pall of uncertainty, the journey back to her home state would be fraught with trepidation, each passing mile a reminder of the tumultuous path that lay ahead. Jenna's admission to the authorities laid bare the chilling reality of her involvement in the crime, as she recounted the grim sequence of events with a heavy heart. In her confession, she unraveled the haunting narrative of the fateful night, painting a picture of tragic inevitability. According to Jenna's harrowing testimony, the eve of the crime bore witness to Kenneth's clandestine visit to her home, a clandestine rendezvous that would shroud the dawn in darkness and alter the course of countless lives. As the day unfolded, their illicit tryst unfolded against the backdrop of unsuspecting bliss, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. The tranquility of the day was shattered when Rhonda returned home, unwittingly stumbling upon the clandestine affair brewing in the shadows of her own abode. A confrontation ensued, escalating from heated words to the chilling embrace of violence. In a moment of unfathomable rage, Jenna's hands found purchase around Rhonda's throat, a desperate bid for control that would prove futile in the face of her lover's intervention. With a sickening inevitability, Kenneth stepped forward, a dark harbinger of finality as he seized Rhonda in a grip that defied mercy. The room bore witness to the cruel symphony of violence, the echoes of struggle drowned out by the cold steel of a kitchen blade. In the deafening silence that followed, Rhonda lay motionless, her life extinguished by the callous hands of her own kin. In the aftermath of the heinous act, Kenneth's fragile resolve faltered, his stomach lurching in revulsion at the sight of his own depravity. Vomiting into the void, he grappled with the weight of their transgression, a grim testament to the depths of human depravity. When pressed by authorities regarding the whereabouts of the murder weapon, Jenna's response offered little solace, her words a chilling testament to the calculated nature of their flight. With steely resolve, she recounted their hasty disposal of the incriminating evidence, a macabre ritual enacted in the shadow of their impending doom. As Jenna recounted her tale, her lover lingered on the precipice of life and death, his mortal coil tethered to the fleeting tendrils of existence. Yet, fate would not afford him the opportunity to atone for his sins, for the specter of mortality loomed large over his hospital bed. In the cold embrace of October's twilight, Kenneth breathed his last, leaving behind a legacy marred by tragedy and unfulfilled promise. Following the formalities of the court, Jenna found herself facing the weight of justice, her fate entwined with the tendrils of guilt and accusation. The charges levied against her bore testament to the severity of her transgressions, branding her as the architect of her stepmother's demise and a perpetrator of theft. Held without reprieve in the confines of a juvenile detention center, Jenna awaited her trial with a heavy heart, her thoughts haunted by the specter of her own culpability. As the gravity of her situation sank in, her father, once a pillar of familial devotion, turned his back on her, his words a damning indictment of her actions. Gone was the paternal instinct to protect, replaced instead by a grim resolve to see justice served. The news of Kenneth's demise, a grim epilogue to their shared tragedy, was withheld from Jenna until the day of her court hearing. The revelation struck her with the force of a sledgehammer, her world crumbling around her as she grappled with the enormity of her loss. In the hallowed halls of justice, her anguished cries reverberated, a stark reminder of the human cost of her actions. In a bid for clemency, Jenna pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, her admission a frail echo of remorse in the face of overwhelming guilt. Yet, even as she sought redemption, her father's disillusionment loomed large, his cries for systemic reform falling on deaf ears. For Philip, the scars of his family's tragedy ran deep, a testament to the failings of a system ill-equipped to protect its most vulnerable. As the sentencing hearing drew near, Susan Hooper, a beacon of hope amidst the storm of legal proceedings, sought to unravel the tangled web of Jenna's tumultuous upbringing. In her impassioned plea for leniency, she painted a portrait of a girl besieged by a lifetime of abuse and neglect, a victim of circumstance driven to desperate measures by forces beyond her control. As the gavel fell and Jenna's fate was sealed, the echoes of her turbulent past reverberated through the hallowed halls of justice, and a haunting reminder of the fragility of the human spirit in the face of insurmountable odds. Despite Jenna's pristine record devoid of any criminal blemish, the perplexing nature of her drastic actions left many scratching their heads in bewilderment. How could a girl so esteemed by her educators and peers stoop to such depths of desperation without a discernible cause? The absence of her family during the trial only added fuel to the fire of speculation, with Philip's refusal to participate and Jenna's mother's conspicuous absence casting a shadow of doubt over their parental obligations. Delving deeper into Jenna's tumultuous past, Susan unearthed a trail of abandonment and neglect that painted a stark picture of maternal indifference. Drawing from a trove of evidence and records, she pieced together the fractured narrative of Jenna's early years, revealing a childhood marred by the absence of maternal guidance and care. Susan's exhaustive investigation traversed state lines, scouring through the annals of child welfare services and medical archives in Indiana and Kentucky alike. Her efforts culminated in a tapestry of testimonies woven together from the threads of Jenna's past acquaintances and confidants. Among them stood Jenna's older half-sister, a reluctant witness whose recollections shed light on the harrowing reality of their shared upbringing. Recounting years of instability and insecurity, she laid bare the truth of their fractured family dynamic, where safety and solace were but distant dreams. As Susan peeled back the layers of Jenna's past, a chilling portrait emerged of a home haunted by the specter of crime and betrayal. Jenna's tender years were marked by the malevolent presence of her mother's ill-fated romance, a dalliance with an ex-convict that plunged their household into a maelstrom of chaos and fear. From the tender age of 3, Jenna bore witness to a procession of theft and infidelity, her innocence shattered by the tumult of her mother's misguided affections. All of these events unfolded before Jenna and her younger brother. It started with a concerned neighbor's call to Child Protective Services upon discovering rats in Jenna's family home. Beyond the rodent issue, the neighbor expressed worry about the children being left unattended for extended periods. Records from social workers' visits painted a grim picture of Jenna's home life. Jenna's mother's hostility toward social workers hindered their access, but when they finally entered, they were met with appalling conditions. Rotten food, piles of garbage, and rat droppings littered the house. Children were found relieving themselves on the floor amidst the squalor. The kitchen was a breeding ground for mold, with unwashed dishes stacked for months. Insects and rodents roamed freely, posing serious health hazards. Compounding the danger, children had unrestricted access to medicines and other harmful substances. Despite efforts to improve the situation by relocating Jenna and her brother to live with their father in Kentucky, conditions did not ameliorate.